Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Minutemen Initiative. We've got some important things to go over today and to discuss. If you haven't heard of the Brown Rocket Actual, well, you're going to hear about him now. He's an interdimensional demon, and he's come from the lands of the social media, and he's come to talk to us about AR builds. Now, AR builds, you all got one, and if you don't, you're going to have one soon, because we're going to give you everything you need to know about ARs, how to build them right, how to build them so they're going to be impervious to the intergalactic, interdimensional demonic possession that's going on here in the situation in the world. And it's a devious thing, and we've known about it for a long time. I've been talking about it since, basically as soon as I came out of the womb, I was telling everyone about it, and I was letting them know. So before I get too fired up, we need to get into the episode. So remember, the deep state's out there. They're paying attention. Build your platforms, build them right, build them appropriately, and build them to be able to survive against the end of all time. So thank you, and enjoy this edition here of the Minutemen Initiative. What is going on, dude?
Yes.
The brownest of rockets is back.
Saddening.
I thought you said saddening.
Oh.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
Saddening.
We finally found a topic that I can talk about.
Yes.
Not be super dumb.
But Steven is also back.
Well, I hope so. Yeah, disappear, dude.
If Steven wasn't here, I would just be talking to myself in the microphone without it being recorded, because Steven's the guy that makes the magic happen over there.
I do something. I don't know if it's
I wouldn't
magic.
know the first thing about getting this thing going. Like, I don't know. First of all, I don't know the password to your computer, so that's step one. Step two is I don't know where.
Dude,
I'm looking at the screen right now. There's so much stuff going on.
That you don't even know how to log into the computer that we run this on.
Yeah. I've literally never. The only time I'm ever over there is when we have a guest on that's not local. So I'm sitting on your side of the table, looking at your computer
and just questioning everything
and just being blown away by the weirdness. Like there was I don't remember which one it was, but one of our last episodes, since we've had a string of remote guests. Whoa, I about said remote viewers, dude. What in the Stephen Greer is going on? But anyways, I was looking at the screen and it started looking like it was like glitching around, and I like made a weird face at Steven. Like, I was like, what? And he waved me off. Like, he was like, dude, you don't know what's going on. Yeah. But
peasant.
Unlike those remote guests, our beautiful guest today is physically here.
Stop it.
Oh, he's physically here.
I'm physically.
You're back for
right
some
here.
more, dude.
My whole body.
Oh, man. No remote viewing going on here.
That's right.
Dude. So what do you think about all this UFO stuff?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
You're throwing me right into it.
I'm getting you in there.
It's really funny to me how aliens have revealed themselves to only the government.
Yeah.
Throughout history.
Yeah.
I feel like you have a few people that might disagree with you, but
yeah, people in Indiana or something, maybe. Okay, there's that, but nobody listens to them, and all of a sudden the government says it, which, since when did the government become trustworthy?
Oh, dude.
It's like, well, all these other people, they might be making it up, but the government said it.
Yeah.
They never make stuff up.
Oh, dude, they never do. They're always truthful all the time,
And it's like, they're talking about it. They're like, we have a specimen, and we have the ships, and they're stored, and I know where they are. It's like, do you have any evidence at all? Or can you show us?
Redacted.
Just the hand.
Yeah.
If it has one.
The hand.
Yeah. The aliens have hands now.
We did recover crafts with biologics.
Yeah.
Were they human? No.
Can you tell us or show us anything other than you just saying it? No. So you're the same as the guy in Indiana.
non-human biologics, dude.
Yeah.
Dude, you and Colton yesterday were killing me with that, dude.
Yeah.
We were on the Kenai River last night fishing.
I saw pictures, yeah.
Yeah, dude. And caught our limit like beasts.
Sick.
And every time like a chunk of fish floated down that had been filleted like upstream, Colton would go.
Non-human biologic.
Colton would go, I've just spotted some non-human biologic.
Yeah.
It's like, no, dude.
Look outside your window right now, and you're going to see a lot of non-human biologics. Probably more than human.
They release the footage of the craft using air quotes, and there's just lumber inside of it.
It's just it's a logging truck.
Yeah.
The dog inside. That qualifies.
I think we were talking about this earlier. Like, I think there's definitely stuff, like there's definitely crafts, I would say, that are out there that we don't know about.
Yeah.
But
a lot of people seen those.
I think they're just classified crafts. I mean, I literally saw like I think I shared it to our story. It was like the perfect meme because we're having this conversation about this. And then I saw a meme that said like, it said like yesterday, U.S. government. And it said like, yeah, we don't know whose crafts those are or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it said also the U.S. government in the 60s, and it showed an SR-71 just like ripping through the skies,
In the 60s.
Yeah, dude.
And it's still the fastest craft on record.
Well, yeah.
On record.
Yeah, good distinction.
And then, the people that are probably on the classified program for this, like, next-gen stealth thing are just like...
Yeah,
this guy's saying it's an alien craft again. But he accidentally stumbled into the hangar, and they're like, "Oh, dude, yeah, aliens."
Well, it's the perfect cover because, and I think I made this point when we were talking about it last. It's like you
Sorry, I'm angling this thing weird.
You literally say, we've discovered hyper advanced craft. It's like, okay. And then as soon as people want to know like more about the actual technology behind that, it's like, and there was non-human entities inside. Yeah. It's like that just takes everyone's focus, and they're just like, what is it? Oh no. And then they just forget to ask the real questions about like, well, how did you track it? Where did you find it? Like all the actual important things that I think are like way more important. Like what kind of technology is it? Is it a threat to humanity? Like all the things that you would think should be asked are just like, what did they look like?
Yeah.
So
they were non-human and
what
biological.
What do you mean non-human? So I don't know. Whole thing's weird.
Yeah.
Whole thing
you could
is
say
super
extraterrestrial.
Weird. Yeah.
But he said non-human. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
E. coli. Wash your hands before you fly the bird.
Birds aren't real, dude. Oh man. All right. Well, moving on. Today the topic at hand is not extraterrestrial activity. It is it might be a little bit of that, but this is mainly going to be talking about some building ARs, building a rifle.
The one subject that I would be semi-qualified for speaking about.
Well, so for those that don't know, Mr. Brown Rocket was on our podcast several episodes ago to talk about the Mark 12 SPR and kind of how it's built. We also talked about its history and its impact on the battlefield, and then why it kind of applies to the modern Minuteman. So we kind of figured we'd take a similar approach, but just talk about AR builds in general. That's something that I think, like, I've had so many conversations recently with different people, and I've seen a lot of different conversations, especially like on the internet, about, a lot of people I think are starting to relook at some of the guns they built and or bought in the past, and they're like, I think the time's come for me to really work up something that's super reliable, that's kind of more I guess duty purposed. Duty sounds random, but you know what I mean? Like
hard use.
Something that's got a very robust serviceability.
Yeah.
That's going to facilitate that modern Minuteman perspective. Really truly building that modern day musket.
The difference in like the idea behind the gun between a military small arms weapon and a civilian small arms weapon. That gap is closing a little bit. People used to build civilian guns completely different.
Yeah.
Because they were built for a different purpose. It's like I'm defending my home.
Yep.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Or I'm going out and I'm shooting coyotes and that kind of stuff.
Or like competition shooting.
Competition made the whole market completely different for like a decade.
Yeah, it really did.
And it's now people are getting back into combat weapons.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's good. And, there's definitely a lot of lessons that can be learned from, decades upon decades of the AR family being used in the military, not just the U.S. military, but a lot of NATO countries, and it's got tons of use, very widespread. But there's also a lot of really good lessons learned too from from things like the competition community and so on, continued on down the line. But like you said, a lot of it's coming back to a lot of mil-spec stuff, which is kind of funny because I remember when I was like in the military, it's like mil-spec was just frowned upon to the highest degree. It was like, oh, and all these like super lightweight, like fast type builds were popular, and people were like, oh, my civilian build would.
Everybody watched Magpul Dynamics.
Yeah. So true, dude.
Sick video. Watch it.
Yeah. But yeah, and I think there's a good mixture of things you can learn from as far as like how to save weight, but then also maintaining strength. There's a lot of things now that are possible that weren't before.
Yeah. And just as an overall preface about the subject of the video, building guns and having guns is a super duper small part of the entire paradigm of like the modern Minuteman or preparedness type thing. So this is not the end all be all. It's just the one thing I can talk about.
Well, it's just a good, and
it's fun.
If you're finding yourself in a place where you're trying to you're taking this more seriously. Yeah. Maybe you've sold off some guns that you feel like didn't make any sense, or you're planning to, and you want to reinvest into. Yeah.
This is for people that initially are invest.
One. Yeah. We're going to hopefully give you some good tips and advice to kind of send you on your way so you don't do what I've done, which is build a lot of guns that were random. Yeah. And I've made a lot of mistakes. I've built several ARs up until this point. Not as many recently. I did recently just build one, but the Mr. Brown Rocket over here, I almost said your name. Almost had to edit in the redacted. Anyways, you've built several pretty recently and have gone through a pretty wide
everything variation. I've ever built has been recent.
Yeah, and you it's so true. And then Steven also and all, on top of that, Steven and I build a lot for customers here. We do build ARs and stuff like that for people. So we apply a lot of these same things we're going to talk about to those builds. That's like a thing, whenever I'm talking to a customer about getting something built, I'm always trying to prioritize longevity and reliability. Anytime red anodized parts comes up in the conversation, I kind of respectfully go, ooh, there might be someone else that I would recommend to.
If they make red anodizing, look elsewhere.
That's just not, I don't enjoy doing builds like that. I enjoy making something purpose built for a role. Tell me what you want to do with it. What's tailored around that idea first, and then go. So with that being said, I think that's a good place to start. It's coming up with your use case.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously rifles look way different depending on what you want to do with them.
Yep.
They all shoot bullets.
Whoa.
Other than that, the sky's the limit basically. We mostly are going to be talking about AR-15s because that's the only thing I know about. Yeah. If you want to build an AK-47 or something like that, good luck. And
it's a lot harder. They are not just clad together easily in a garage like a lot of people think they are. No. They're actually pretty complicated, or they can be pretty complicated.
You could spend a lot of time building one and have it turn out really janky.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So ARs for sure. And in the future we might get into some other stuff. I'd like to maybe in the future get into like the whole battle rifle class, like heavier, 7.62 stuff. I've got a guy in mind for that, but we'll see. Yeah, I mean, I think 95% of your people out there are going to be running some kind of AR variant. So this will apply to you. And I think on that you should be. If you want to be that
you're in
hipster,
the US.
Yeah, if you're in the US and even if you're not, I don't want to go down the bullpup rabbit hole, but
oh no.
Bullpups are trash, dude. I'm probably just hurt a lot of feelings. They're cool.
Yeah, they are cool.
Like,
some of them are cool.
The AUG is pretty cool.
The AUG is cool.
I've always loved the AUG.
Yeah.
And then I shot one and I was like, whoa, dude, that's not fun.
It's weird.
But they're still cool.
The reason they're not that great is the ergonomics, and especially the trigger is usually really bad because you have to have this long linkage system to get back to the action, which is behind the trigger. And
it's so plasticky and like...
Yeah, they built everything from plastic on the AUG back in the day when they're like just space age materials.
Yeah.
It's... yeah. All of a sudden it's in the polar ice caps.
Yeah.
Everything's plastic. Yeah. Well, anyways, even the trigger group, everything on that's plastic.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And it's somehow durable. I don't know how they did that. So,
dude, pretty crazy.
But it's also really just...
Steyr just doing crazy things.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and that's like, a lot of the old, like, FN bullpups were like that, too. Like the P90 and the FNS 2000 and, all the... And they're cool, man. Like, don't get me wrong. From, like, guns being cool perspective, all that stuff's cool.
Yeah.
But all I know is, like, anytime I worked with NATO guys, like, overseas and stuff, and they had that, they were all of them were like, oh, we wish we could have the M4.
Yeah.
And anytime they had a chance to use them, they did. And you take a look at like all the overseas special forces units like SAS and all these other SF teams, most of the time they're going to use some kind of M16 variant, M4 variant. So it's just a good system. It's been around forever. I know times are changing. Like there's a lot of, you don't want to be that guy that just like you don't want to become the new M14 fanboy where you're just like, I'll only ever have an M1A. I used it. Those black rifles. It's like I do hope that we progress past the AR family for the sake of like advancement.
Yeah,
but
but every advancement we've ever made so far is just like a tanadized AR-18.
Yeah, it's true.
An AR-15, but you can fold it, and we put a piston on it for some reason.
Yeah, but the reality is, it's like the AR system is a good system. It's going to be around for a long time, even in service.
And the volume, like the economy of scale, is such that it's so cheap to get really good parts.
Yeah.
And it might seem expensive, but go try to shop for a different firearm, and like you're not gonna be able to find parts the same way. You're not gonna be able to put them on with tools in your garage and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and just not many people make them, and when they do, they're made in smaller volume and they're more expensive. This is a huge market.
Yeah,
and it's very well refined, and people know how to do it right. Now. And modern machining and manufacturing has made it super easy and relatively cheap to get parts that would be crazy back in the day.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. I mean, we live in a really cool time for this kind of stuff. And you've got a lot of companies that have done a lot of work to make that possible,
Yeah.
So I guess getting back into like use case, kind of overall perspective for putting something together, I think it's important to start with like, what's your goal? Like, what are you trying to do with this thing?
Yeah.
Like, are you prioritizing precision?
Mm-hmm.
Are you thinking about like more home defense kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Do you want like a general purpose rifle that's like, hey, I want
kind
something
of a jack of all trades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like that multi-purpose rifle.
Yep.
Something that like, you know, my main idea for this is defense and fighting.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, I think that's kind of the direction a lot of people are starting to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for your first build, that's probably a good place to start. I think you'll end up building a really tough gun that can do a lot of different things if you kind of start in that area. But you might not necessarily want that. You might be like, hey, I'm way out in the middle of nowhere and I want something that I can kind of hunt with as well as defend my family with. So then maybe an SPR would be more kind of what you're looking at. If you
just want to build one for fun and you already have a gun.
For sure.
At that point, you don't need us.
Yeah,
Just go find fun parts that aren't red anodized.
That's your line?
Yeah, that's the line. I don't care how fun it is. Stop it.
You can have fun, but not that kind of fun. Yeah. Oh, man.
It's called sinning.
So any thoughts on that? Like as far as...
Well, it's hard for me to tell you, the listener, what you want or what you want to do with it. You could sort of take some time to write that out, maybe. Or versus like just starting to, because I've done this before. I just start building by parts that are available. In fact, I got into building guns 3 years ago, when everything was not available, and I was like, this is my last chance. Little did I know this was like the 20th last chance that everyone's had in the history of the AR-15. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to buy the parts that are available as fast as possible because they're going to be gone forever. That like
the fear purchases.
Because I didn't know anything about it at that point. I just started buying parts, and I just came up with this weird looking just amalgamation of parts that don't make that much sense. And then I have a gun that's like, it works, but it's not built with a specific mindset. It's just built because the parts were available, and then like it's okay, but it doesn't really do anything that well. And I actually had some other iterations that didn't have very good performance because every single part on the gun was from a different manufacturer that didn't have the same spec. And they were all just kind of cheap. And they didn't work well together. And so it's kind of...
So because you weren't as...
Build something cohesive. Cohesive.
And I feel like kind of what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is like because you weren't as zeroed in on like, I'm building this gun to do these things.
Exactly.
It ended up being like a less effective build. Not as refined. It's not as refined as some of the builds you're turning out now. It wasn't made with an idea in mind.
It was made with parts that were available. And that's okay, but if you don't have to do it, don't do it that way.
Right.
And so just figure out what you want. Like, I want a gun that I only use for home defense, and I would challenge that. Think that once you build it, you're probably going to want to use it for other things. If you don't know, my recommendation is to build one that just kind of does everything decent.
And that general purpose.
And then go out and use it, play with it, and then things will start to irritate you. And you'll move in a different direction if you need to, or you'll find out that you built the perfect gun. I wouldn't start by building something super like specialized, which is what I did. I started by building 10.3s, basically 10.3 inch barrels, because I didn't know anything at the time, and the dude that I was getting advice from was like, 10.3 is the greatest.
Just a Mark 18 fanboy.
Basically. And he was like, this is the greatest barrel that's ever happened. Everything else is a mistake. And I'm like, yeah, dude, okay. And so I built some of those, and then and then later this
dude, the young brown rocket.
And then later the opinion immediately changed of that person. And he was like, this is no longer the best. It kind of sucks. And now I have a different barrel length. It's like, I just spent a ton of money building this thing, and I don't know what I'm doing. And so I'm like, okay, I gotta start learning how to actually do this instead of just listening to everyone else.
And I think some of that stuff, like, at least for me, and I don't know, people probably look at it differently, but understanding the pros and cons of individual parts will better set you up for building a purpose-built, I guess, rifle. Because you know what your sacrifices are by, hey, if I'm going to go with this length barrel, or I'm going to go stainless versus like, some sort of like...
And a red flag would be someone that tells you that this one single thing is the only way.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. It's usually like probably based on opinion that may or may not be based in reality. So, yeah. Understanding the pros and cons is better than saying that one thing is the best for everything. So,
yeah. And I think there's a lot of, just by the nature of how information shared and how, social media plays a big role in like a lot of the education on this stuff now.
Yeah. Whether
it's podcasts like this or, someone's Instagram account or someone that you respect, like some individual or gunfluencer, if you will, or some trainer or something like that. It's like, I think you naturally go to the people you kind of listen to or respect or follow or whatever. And you see like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
And I actually think that's a little bit of a mistake. I think it's good to take note of what they're doing, but then really try to see like why are they doing it that way? Why? Yeah. What are the reasons they've done that? And unfortunately, there's a lot of whoever it is. I'm trying to think of somebody to use for example, but Travis Haley. Let's say it's Travis Haley. You're following Travis Haley, and then you see him running a build and you're like, whoa, that's a 10.3 Mark 18 build. That's sick.
Must be the best.
That must be the best. Yeah. And so, the videos talking about, vehicular CQB tactics.
Yeah.
And it's like, but you're like hyper focused in on the rifle. Like, what's that build? And like, you're looking at it. And then all of a sudden in another video, he's using an 18-inch gun. And it's like, what is he doing with that? So it's like, there's definitely different tools for the tool shed and different jobs need different tools.
Yep.
So I think dialing in on that and really focusing on that idea as a whole is going to help you a lot. And then avoiding, like, maybe not necessarily avoiding because it might actually work for you, but identifying trends. Like right now, the trend is like recce rifles, like SPRs, I've never seen, I feel like a couple years ago, nobody knew what the Mark 12 was. And now everybody's like, I'm building a Mark 12.
Yeah.
Which sucks because I just built
one. A lot of times they're building a Mark 12 and they still don't know what a Mark 12 is.
Yeah. And true. And the Mark 12, it's like, that's an old gun. And that same thing happened a few years ago with the Mark 18. Like you're talking about 10.3 guns. Like I wasn't actually surprised to hear that because like Steven not long ago, it's like everybody that came in the shop that was wanting an AR build, they're like, I'm going to do, it was like there was a period of time where all people were building were 10.3 guns with pistol braces on them.
I think it has a lot to do with the fact that the weird clarification that people got, they were like, you can use braces. Or like people that cared, obviously.
Were
like, you can use braces. And then that's one of the things that got me on it was like, if the government doesn't want me to have it, I want it.
Yeah.
That means 10.3 is the best.
And they're cool. Like, and none of this is to say that they're bad, but at the end of the day, like
understand the use purpose.
Yeah. And understand what you're shooting. Because like you said, rifles shoot bullets and smaller bullets tend to need a decent amount of velocity to maintain lethality. And it's like, you have less velocity out of a 10.3 than you do out of a 14.5-inch barrel by quite a bit, actually. And I know there's like material coming out on that. I think Grantham just released a video on different barrel lengths and stuff like that.
I don't
want to get too much into barrels yet. We will.
Yeah, we will.
But I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of information out there and it can be hard to wade through it. That's why I really like what you said earlier about, don't necessarily get hyper focused on something specific. You were saying you don't necessarily recommend starting with a specialty. Like start with a more general purpose. I think having an overall idea, like, hey, I want to build a fighting purpose, like a self-defense / fighting rifle, something that I can, for lack of a better phrase, something I could deploy with. You hear people say that, like, I wouldn't deploy with it. You hear people say, it's like, well, if you wouldn't deploy with it, then why'd you build it like that? You know what I mean? It's like, why'd you take shortcuts and why'd you compromise on something that should be considered life-saving equipment? So I think that premise is a good premise for anybody. If you're listening to this podcast and you're interested in building a rifle, I would hope that one of your pinnacle goals is to build something that you can rely on and fight with.
Exactly. And if that's why you're building it, start preparing yourself and your wife to spend a little bit of money.
Yeah.
Maybe over time.
Yeah.
Or get a piggy bank or something. Because it's more important to get. Now, you don't have to get Gucci or anything. Like there's a point where you start seeing like diminishing returns on your investment. But
I agree.
But it is going to take a certain amount of money to get a quality part because you have to pay the people to be doing the QC.
Yeah.
And the proper materials. It's a big process. These things aren't cheap to make. The good ones.
Yeah. And it will be worth it.
Absolutely.
It absolutely will.
Coming from people who've built, me anyways, guns
me too.
that are cheap.
Oh, I 100% have.
Yeah. So I would have spent a lot less money if I had just built a quality one from the get-go.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think if you're one of those people, this has happened before. We've had people come in to the shop or like message us on Instagram and be like, "Screw you guys! Now I have to completely rebuild my gun."
Yep.
Like they listened to our NPR episode in the Minutemen layout series that we did, and they were like, "Oh no!" Like, because we got into a little bit of this stuff in that episode. I got to redo my gun, and it's not intended to do that, but I feel like if you are able to identify that in something you've built, that's a good thing. That's just part of the natural evolution, and you just realized that a little later than you could if you were just starting, or if you were kind of like newly into this with some like really cheap builds, which is okay. Like, again, my first ever AR was a cheap gun, and it wasn't anything special. And I've built some ragtag guns throughout the years, and you get to a point where it's like, oh man, like you learn. Like that thing's more of a novelty item, this product, is not really something very serious, and it's something that I thought was cool looking or whatever, and and there's a whole myriad of reasons you could have, and that's okay. Like I don't want anyone to feel discouraged, or if we say something in this episode that's like, oh, are they talking about me? Have they seen my gun? Like it's not intentional, man.
Yes, we have. We're talking about you.
Imagine me right in front of you staring intently.
Just wagging your finger.
Yeah.
No, we're definitely not wagging fingers because...
No, where you going?
Oh, whoa. Yeah. Don't be wagging
in an odd way.
No, we definitely have been there, and I think that's why I think it'd be a good idea, because we'll share mistakes we've made, and more importantly, we'll share what we've learned. And that's the thing too, is that we're still learning. There's things that that our perspectives may change on, so, but yeah, anything else on the, that?
Our perspectives are going to change because newer things are going to come out, and it's going to be like
constantly changing. However, most of
that's a good thing though.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good thing. Most of the stuff that I built in the recent past have been using parts that have been around for a very long time.
Yeah.
Because that's what I've just come back around to. And they work really well.
Yeah.
I forgot where I was going with that.
Well,
it's gone.
Let's get into it.
So, I think kind of to elaborate more on that, I think it's because, you don't really need to reinvent the wheel on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like there is proven, tried and true stuff that is out and available, and it's still being used.
Yeah.
So
we can, I guess, dive into it.
Yeah.
Just start out with what I think is the most important part. I don't know if this is out of order, but the most important parts of the gun are the barrel.
Yep.
I thought you were going to say something weird at first. I thought
the muzzle device.
Yeah.
No. the buffer.
The castle nut.
Yeah, I think your upper receiver as a collective is absolutely the most important part.
Yeah.
It's where your optics are going to be mounted to. Yeah. It's obviously managing your barrel, which is like the heart of your gun.
Yeah. So anyways, the barrel, the bolt carrier group, and then what's holding all that together being the upper receiver.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the rail by extension. So AR-15s, if you're not familiar, they pretty much break in half when you take them apart. So there's a lower, and people just call it a lower. And then there's an upper. So it's pretty easy to remember. The upper receiver has your barrel, your entire operating system other than your buffer. The lower holds the trigger and the magazine and the buffer and everything. And then they just kind of go. They just kind of go.
Nice.
And then you have a functioning gun that works. So,
and then
the upper's the most important. Just,
no. Just sound effects. Taking over.
Just goes.
Ooh.
That's what it sounds like when you put them together. There's 2 of those, so you got to do it again. And then you go because you're trying to move it because the hole isn't aligned. Then it goes.
Oh, that sounded tight.
Yeah, that's right. That's because you spent money to get the quality parts.
All right.
Okay, moving on. This is going to be another 4-hour podcast.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the receiver first.
Okay.
The actual receiver.
So the actual receiver. So there's the upper receiver and the upper receiver group. The group is the whole thing put together. The upper receiver is just the aluminum part that holds your bolt carrier. Most people probably have a basic understanding of AR-15, so I'm going to not go over the...
You're not going to insult anybody's intelligence.
Yeah, people are like, get on with it. So yeah, the upper receiver. This is important because it is a stress component. There's high pressures and a lot of movement and a lot of heat going into this thing. And it is literally holding the barrel to the gun.
Yeah.
And holding the very fast reciprocating piece of heavy steel that's going right towards your face.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal.
Yeah, it's definitely a big deal.
Yeah. And so the important things to look for are that it is properly heat treated and quality checked. That it's made from the right materials, i.e. 7075 T6 aluminum, T6 being the heat treating process, which makes it much stronger. And then also that it's been machined to a high degree of precision and accuracy. Yeah. So you want everything to fit well in there, otherwise you're going to have problems, because if it's not correct, you're going to have accuracy issues and or functioning issues. Yeah. And so if it's too tight or too loose, you're going to have problems with your bolt carrier moving properly in there and interfacing with the buffer and all that.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're bringing this up, because there's a super common misconception, or I'd even say like misinformation being kind of pushed out there to the masses, which is like, and I hear it all the time, and it's, well, your actual stripped receiver, the stripped receiver, just the receiver portion alone doesn't really matter. It can be from anyone. They're all the same. They're all, it's like, it doesn't really matter. It's not doing anything. Yeah. It's like, no, it's actually doing a lot. Yeah. It's highly important.
The fact that it's not moving is a big deal.
Yeah, exactly.
It shouldn't.
So yeah, and then even your rail, like your Picatinny section that's machined into it on top is like the amount of receivers you can get that are completely out of spec and not properly aligned is staggering.
Yeah.
So even little things like that, like how that's going to align with the rest of your rail and all those little things are.
Yep. And if the part that holds the barrel isn't tight to the barrel. If it's just like you put the barrel in and it's like just loose,
the receiver,
that's going to have problems with accuracy, and it could, if it's really bad, have problems having being able to guide your bolt into the chamber.
Yeah,
like your lugs could be misaligned if it's grossly off. That doesn't happen very often,
but it does. And, and our small little store, I've had people bring in guns that have problems, and they're like, I can't figure out what's going on, and we put our gauge in there, and I'm literally like, whoa, I regret to inform you that your receiver is out of spec.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? What does that mean?
The whole gun
has
to be taken apart.
It means you need a new one.
Yeah.
So, like, you can't just auger it out?
No. That's why you're in this predicament.
I'm just going to order you a BCM upper.
Yeah. So
but anyways,
it's very simple. It doesn't have to be fancy. It just needs to work, and it needs to work properly and be very precise. So it's important to buy a manufacturer that's known for being reputable. Other than that, you're good. These don't cost very much. They can be anywhere from like 80 to 130 for a good one. You can spend as much as you want, but you're not going to get anything special after that.
Yeah.
And then there's, of course, billet versus forged. That's like a big thing. There's pros and cons to both. Forged is going to be cheaper because that's how it's been made since its inception.
Yep.
In like the 60s. When was it? Was it the 60s?
Yeah.
It was used in Vietnam, so it had to have been.
Yeah.
Anyways, it was like, that was space age manufacturing at the time because they just didn't do CNC machining.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have like computers that could do all that kind of stuff, and we didn't have that high level of precision. So they did forgings, and then they would machine it out. And the cool thing about forging is that it makes it stronger because it's basically just hammering and creating that. People that are super into like metallurgy are gonna make fun of me because I don't know the right words, but
not, I guess not an alloy
tension in the metal,
because it's not two different materials, but yeah.
Well, it is an alloy, 7075. B6 aluminum.
There you go.
Yeah.
That is an alloy. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So they mix some other stuff in it. Makes
but
it
that's
harder.
why it's so strong. Yeah.
Yes, it is. It makes it strong per thickness or per
like the strength to size ratio.
Yeah,
that's a very
per
unscientific
volume
way
or
to say
per
it.
density. It's stronger, something like that. Anyways, it's good and it's light.
Yeah,
and it's easy to get and it's cheap. Now, billet is something that people do because they don't want to have to pay for forging, so they want to make everything in house. And they can do it from just bar stock 75 aluminum. It's not quite as strong, but you also have control over how thick the walls are going to be. You can control every aspect of the receiver. If you want it to fit custom with a rail or something, you can do it. So it allows manufacturers to do whatever they want. If you're really into that, go for it.
Yeah.
I don't think it is that big of a deal. You're going to get just as good of a receiver getting a forged, if not better.
Yeah.
Because the only way to make a billet one stronger is to make it thicker
and heavier.
Yeah. Most of the time people use billet because they want to make it lighter, which I would advise against making an upper receiver lighter. They're already weigh almost nothing compared to all the other components on the gun.
Yeah.
That's like when you want to lighten your car, so you remove like the headrests. It's not going to do anything. It might be lighter, but it has, like, it's not a component that matters.
Yeah.
And you're going to die if you get rear-ended.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a it's a component that deals with a lot of stress, and it's not heavy. Just buy one that's heavier, not lightened by removing metal.
I think it's important to keep track of your weight,
Yep.
But not to that level. And I think that's kind of what you were saying. Like,
putting one dimple in your barrel is going to change it more than doing anything with your upper receiver.
Chasing weight savings to just make a hyper light gun, when you're talking about a gun that's going to be used for like it's that kind of duty purpose or fighting purpose.
Yeah.
It's just not, they don't meld together well. Now, I don't mean that to be like an absolute statement, because there's things you can do, and we'll get into that, but I just think those two goals should not be aligned. Like if you're going to make a race gun for 3-gun or something like that, by all means, make it light, make it fancy and nimble.
Yeah. And even then, don't do it to the receiver.
Yeah.
You're going to save like 1 gram.
Yeah.
I guarantee it.
I'm a huge fan of forged uppers.
Yep.
Mil spec, there's a huge movement out there. It's actually dying down. It was big for a little while of like, you don't need the forward assist. Like, just get rid of that.
I was about to talk about that.
Oh, were you?
Yeah.
Like, please get an upper with a forward assist.
Here's a fun fact. You don't have to press it.
Whoa!
Just don't touch it, dude. It's like, there's so many people that are like, it induces malfunctions, and it
does not.
And it's like,
it is good to have a forward assist.
You know how convenient it is? Yeah, I used it all the time
before.
Yeah.
And people tell me they use one specific case or something that it's like, well, if your gun is out of battery, and you forcing it into battery is going to cause more harm than good. And that's not necessarily the case. If you have a weird ejection or something, and then you're trying to clear a malfunction, it just doesn't go all the way quite into battery, and it's fine. It just didn't have the force. You can tap it. It doesn't mean that there's a boulder in there.
Yeah.
That would be a problem in itself.
Yeah.
That a forward assist isn't going to fix, and not having it isn't going to fix.
Yeah.
Do you know how many times, like, from a reconnaissance background, I used a forward assist? Like, anytime that we were about to go into a house and I wanted to just make sure that I got one in the chamber, even though I always had one, but you still want to press check, just like any time you would. You press check, well, guess what? You need the force of your bolt to reset that round. Yeah. Well, you can't do that if you're trying to be quiet.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So you got to let it down softly, and then you hit your forward assist that actually gets the bullet back into where it's supposed to be at. And that's what it's intended for.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. You're like, well, you should already know that there's one in the chamber, so you shouldn't be, press checking or whatever.
It's like, dude,
no, it doesn't matter. You can check.
Yeah, like absolutely, and you should be checking. You should be in control of your weapon system at all times, and sometimes you need to visually confirm. A lot of stuff happens, especially when you've
been on the field for weeks.
Yeah,
yeah,
and you're literally on mission in like austere environments. You're cold, wet, tired.
Yeah,
like visual confirmation, physical confirmation is huge. Having the forward assist, it's how it was originally designed, and it's still a design feature that I think is highly appropriate. And should not be avoided just because you don't like it.
Yeah, and if you hate it and you don't want it, just don't use it, or don't even install one. It could just be sitting there. You can have like a gas port. People put extra little gas ports on there. I wouldn't advise that you do that, but if you hate it that much,
I'm telling you, from a fighting perspective, for serviceability and making a good, reliable platform, you want a forward assist.
Yeah.
Again, same thing as Steven. Like, there's been multiple times using guns professionally, using these platforms professionally, I've needed to use the forward assist.
Yeah. The very worst case scenario is you never need it and you never touch it and nothing happens bad.
The old military malfunction, what's the word I'm looking for? Acronym was sports was what it was, and it implemented tapping the forward assist, so that's, and I can't remember them all. Can you?
Pull, observe, rack tat,
shoot. Yeah.
Sports,
which is very it's a very old school method, and you don't need to do all that when you have a malfunction. You just do not. But still, it's the point being, these guns, especially suppressed, get a lot of carbon, very gassy.
Yep.
With a lot of that, you're basically increasing the size of your BCG, and you're tightening up those tolerances. You're making it harder for those parts to move, and sometimes you might have problems with it seating into battery. Now, that's an indication that you absolutely need to do maintenance and clean. But if you don't have that capability, you can't. You're still in, a situation where you are not going to be able to maintain your rifle for a little bit. That's where you're going to really be happy that you're not the weirdo that just has a slick upper receiver and no forward assist.
And then they're like, well, you can just push the bolt. Those get hot.
Very hot.
That's exactly where you're pushing is where the gas comes out.
And so you have to breach open your gun and either push the back
weird.
Or open or try to shove in on the side, It's like, no. Or I can have a implement on the side of my upper receiver that's literally built to be there, that I can just go dook, and then now I'm good to go.
We've already given this topic more time than it deserves, because if people just start saying that, just stop listening to them.
It's true.
Just have a forward assist. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's not going to hurt anything if you don't. Just Anyways, okay, upper receiver done. In spec, properly heat treated. Forged is our favorite, but your results may vary.
What are some good companies for upper receivers before we move on?
Also have a dust cover, because
there are these weird companies that will make ones that don't have a dust cover.
Dumb.
That's stupid. It's not going to cause any problems either. Don't listen to anyone that says it does.
Get in the habit of closing your dust cover too. That's like my weird little OCD thing. Anytime we're out training and I look around and see other people's guns with dust covers open, I'll just go up and go
Yeah.
And then they go, oh, because they know that I'm like, why is it open?
Judgment upon you.
Yeah. No, but seriously, the dust cover is handy to have. It does exactly what it says it does.
The reason AR-15 is such a good system is because it's a very closed system.
Yep.
And if you start opening it, it causes problems because it's tight tolerances in there.
Yep. So when you rack your rounds in there, close that dust cover. There's some sound effects for you.
Yeah.
And then... And additionally, after you've been kinetic and you move on, close that dust cover again. Close the dust cover.
I did that with my mouth.
All right, now we can move on. Oh, no, companies. What companies do we recommend for upper receivers?
So, like, probably the best bang for the buck is BCM.
Bravo Company.
Bravo Company. So the reason that we like them is because they have a thermal fit barrel extension, which means it's very tight. You have to heat it up in order to put the barrel in, and then as it cools, it forms a very tight grip on that the barrel that goes in there, basically the barrel extension, and that keeps accuracy good and keeps it in the proper position in there.
Yeah.
And so, it just puts a little bit less strain so that the bolt, the barrel nut is not the only thing keeping it on.
Yep.
It's also, even if you took the barrel nut off, it'd probably still work.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend
Not recommended, yeah.
But it's very tight and it keeps it accurate.
Rocket said I could do this. So I'm gonna try.
Don't do that.
I'm going to save weight and take my barrel nut off. Please don't do that.
Woo! All right. Dumb thing number one. Probably not number one. It's probably like number 10.
So BCM.
Yeah, BCM's a good one. Centurion Arms makes a good one.
Yes, very good.
The cheapest I would go is probably Aero Precision. They're generally well machined. You roll the dice a little bit, but that was like in 2021. They had some problems.
They've got some good quality control.
Now they're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
And they're easy to find. They're inexpensive and they're made properly.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go cheaper.
Yeah, I agree.
You might get one that's good, but you're rolling the dice.
Yep.
So
yeah, and I don't want to just crap on Anderson, but I'm going to pick on them just because I thought of them. I see a lot of people that are, again, kind of going back to what we already talked about, like, well, it's the same, you get an Anderson and it's like, it's like, you got to keep in mind that the company that you're buying this receiver from is the company that machined it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't, going back to the forged thing, there are only a few forges. There's
only 5 forges.
Yeah. But if you're confused at the difference, look up what a forged receiver looks like. Like type in, unmachined forged AR receiver. It's like just a block of, you'll identify some of the shapes there. This isn't necessarily true, but it'll give you a rough idea. All the rounded edges on a forged receiver will be still present, but all the machining, like all the
parts that interface with components that need to work is done at the manufacturer, not the forging.
And that's why it's important to really be careful and vet the manufacturers you're buying from.
That includes the heat treating process that makes it stronger.
Yeah, which is super important.
That's done at the manufacturer as well, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
And so that's super important. That's what keeps you alive if you have a catastrophic malfunction of the gun with too much powder or something. If your gun is weak, it could very well explode outward and hurt you bad.
Yeah.
And we've seen cases where strong receivers have saved people's lives, basically.
Yeah.
So it's important. There's no reason not to. This is not an expensive component.
Yeah.
Spend the extra $20 and get one that's good.
Yeah.
That is good.
For sure.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, there's plenty of other manufacturers that make these. Like everybody and their brother has a receiver now.
Right.
Those are the few big ones that we thought. If you're looking at other ones, you feel free to message me.
Yeah.
You have social media.
The Brown
Rocket.
Brown Rocket. You can also message Steven and I over at our Instagram.
Probably better that you message them.
But no, either. Honestly, Mr. Brown here is just knows
I could get
a lot.
A little schizo with you.
But I would say just big tips on that. Like, just do your research.
Yeah.
If you have a company claiming that they've changed this and that because they get this is better this way, and you just really do your research on that. Thankfully, there's a lot of information out there, but I have found that your big reputable companies that are doing this to high degrees with a lot of success aren't changing that much from the original design.
Yeah.
So be careful when it's like, well, we removed this, or we put a weird little machining mark here for this and that, and it's like, okay,
cool.
Just do your research on it.
Oh, I forgot to mention, probably the tightest fitting and the best receiver I've ever bought was from Thoroughbred Armament. They actually do their own machining. To my knowledge, they have their own in-house upper receivers, and it's the best receiver I've ever owned.
Wow,
it
nice.
fit tightly on all my lowers. It fit my barrel really tight. Everything was in spec. The finishing quality was really good. I just say it, and it's dry film loomed internally, which is like the mil spec thing. Real nice, really nice.
Yeah,
I would highly recommend it, and they're inexpensive.
Cool.
So,
yeah, I think we haven't played with them yet, but I've been pretty impressed with some of Ripcord Industries receivers and some of the stuff he's paying attention to. It seems like he's doing quite a bit.
Manufacturer.
But I say that I want to say though that I don't have any personal experience yet. But keep an eye on them.
Yeah, Geisley makes good ones too. I think. Yeah, I don't know if they sell just normal Ford receivers.
I think they're just doing.
They do upper and lower sets.
Oh yeah,
come together.
Yep, you're right. Yeah.
Those are great. Yeah, nothing wrong with those.
Dude, they are really good. They're doing really good machining work. Like
good value,
very quality. Yeah. So, but like you were saying, I think BCM is hard to beat for the price. It's pretty available.
Yeah,
and I mean, I know people get tired of hearing that. Like I see comments on social media all the time. It's like, oh, it's probably going to be a BCM recommendation. It's like, yeah, well, you know what?
Because they've been making good stuff for decades.
Stop fighting that because everyone's doing it. It's like there's a reason that everyone's doing that.
Like the hatred for Glock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't get me started.
Oh no.
But okay, so moving on to barrel, and we'll go ahead and cover the gas system too, but we'll talk more about the barrel.
Yeah. So this is the part where it starts to get really specific. It's not just get one that's properly machined. You can do a lot of weird stuff with barrels.
This is where your use case is going to inform too a lot.
Yeah, this is probably the number one thing you would change for use case, because it decides the length of the gun, it decides the ballistics roughly. I mean, outside of it being the same caliber.
Yeah.
It decides how fast or slow it goes. You have different twist rates of the rifling, basically how fast it spins the bullet. And then you have different coatings and different materials. Yeah. So like you only get 70-75 T6 forging or billet, but it's the same 70-75. This one you can do weird stuff with. You've got 4140 chromoly vanadium. You've got 416R stainless. You've got like 410 or something, or 412 or some weird number stainless from BCM. And then you've got other weird stuff from other people. But yeah, you can get weird with it. And they all do different things. It's not just one's better than the other. So you'll have to inform yourself a bit based on what length you want. Just understand that the legal ramifications of certain barrel lengths under 16 inches. So anything under 16 inches is classified as an SBR for the ATF. Now, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just telling you to be informed that if you just slap that on any lower receiver, it's not going to be legal federally.
Yeah.
So do with that what you will. There's some remedies to that, like a 14.5. You can pin and weld a whatever muzzle device you choose, which permanently attaches it. Basically, you have to get it cut off by a machine shop. They can do that.
Yeah.
But that's the only way you would make it legal, because then the overall length is like 16.
Yep.
Basically.
Yeah.
So,
basically, your muzzle device puts it beyond.
So that would be one reason people might steer away from a shorter barrel. Another reason is that it's detrimental to the performance of the round.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the round accelerates. Once you fire the bullet, the round accelerates for as long as it's traveling through the barrel, and the second it exits, it stops accelerating, and that's the speed that it flies until it slows down due to air resistance.
Yep.
And so the shorter it is, the less time it has to accelerate. So it's going to be slower.
Yeah.
And then that can also affect your round stability depending on the twist rate and all this other weird stuff that interacts with it. So the longer the barrel is, the better the bullet's going to act, or the better ballistic performance you're going to get and the better range you're going to get. Now, these are relatively small changes.
Mm-hmm.
So the shorter you get, the more extreme the changes get.
Yep.
So the difference between a 15 and a 16 is almost nothing, where the difference between a 10 and an 11 can be significant.
Right.
So also, I wouldn't advise anything below a 10.3 inch barrel.
Yeah.
Ballistically. Also, the gas system and the way that the AR-15 works, it simply won't work reliably past that.
Yeah.
And you're going to have trouble stabilizing the bullet. You're going to have, and your gun's going to have a ridiculous amount of recoil and an insane amount of flash.
Yeah. Yeah. I personally would not recommend anything for 5.56. If you're running 5.56, I would personally not recommend anything shorter than 12.5.
Yeah.
I think
if
once
you want a gun that runs really well, that's
for this idea of, I want to be able to fight with this in case I have to.
Yeah.
Whatever your parameters are beyond that. If you're wanting something that's more nimble, you like, hey, I'm thinking more about my house, but I'd like to be able to get more into this modern Minuteman thing with it, then that 12.5 is
it's nice.
It's going to be really nice. It's short. Your gun's going to feel super small. That's the thing. Like, I think a lot of people get in the head like, man, I got to make this as short as I possibly can. And so they look at like the Mark 18 and stuff like that. It's like, dude, 12.5 when you run like a 12 and a half inch barrel gun versus like a 10.3 or 10.5 or whatever,
feels the same.
They feel almost the same.
Yeah.
It's like, and your performance from 12.5 versus 10.3 is substantially better.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, it incrementally gets, like your performance above 10.5 is incrementally less than it would have been from like that 10 to up to there. So that's my personal recommendation. If you want to build a short boy, 12.5 is where you need to go.
Yeah.
I really, and that's coming from someone that has an 11.5 inch gun, but I wish it was a 12.5 inch gun. So,
and if you want to build a clone rifle of a Mark 18 or like a CQBR Mod 0 or something, do it. Those things are sick.
Yeah, cool.
But don't build it that way specifically because you think it's the best functioning, because it's not necessarily. In fact, even they don't make those anymore. They turned it to an 11.5.
Mm-hmm.
And Knight's Armament won't even make a 10.3.
Yeah.
They never have.
Yeah.
That I'm aware of.
I think 11.5 is the shortest they go with that. So, besides their weird little PDW thing they made, but that was chambered in a different bullet.
Yeah, it's weird.
But
I want one.
I do too.
Okay, well that just defeats the purpose of what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Anyways, for performance, 12.5 is it's really great. And so basically the only advantage that you're getting from a shorter barrel is it's lighter at the front because it's closer to the body.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like more maneuverable, which is
that's arguable, but
arguable. I wouldn't use that as the only reason to build one.
Yep.
But it's also more concealable, especially when you
Yeah.
break the gun down. Because you can't separate the barrel from the receiver unless you get one of those weird barrel separator things, which don't even worry about that. Don't do that.
Yeah.
They might be okay, but it's a weird niche thing. Don't worry about it.
Yep.
The upper stays together for the purposes of this podcast. And that will so that would be something to think about if you're in a super urban environment or an environment that is not non-permissive, like New York City or something like that.
Yeah.
Using that as an example. I'm not telling people to go build illegal guns in New York City. Or am I? I'm just kidding.
Leave that up to your own interpretation.
Yeah. anyways, non-permissive environment is something to think about. Like can I
conceal this?
Can I conceal it? And that's important to think about. You don't want some just hog just out there, 18-inch huge thing that you can't do anything with. You can't take it anywhere. You can't. So that could be something to think about, but don't just do it because it's more maneuverable, because that can be completely fixed with like proper CQB training.
Yeah, and just some rifle handling techniques.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then weight, of course, is somewhat of a concern if you're building this for someone who is like, I don't know, someone that's not particularly strong or able to hold stuff like way out in front of them that's heavy. That might be something to think about. Like, I want something that's enjoyable for them to shoot, so they want to come out with me. Like, you know, if your wife doesn't really shoot guns that much or something, or you got, you know, kids that want to get out and learn, but you can't give them your 15-pound just hoss of an SPR because they're not going to enjoy it. That's something to think about. But anyways, the advantages you get from a longer barrel generally, in my opinion, outweigh the
advantages from a short
barrel. The advantages from a short barrel are personal and subjective. The advantages you get, relatively subjective. The advantages you get from longer barrels is objective.
Yeah,
it will make the round better. Performing.
I almost look at it like, if 16-inch is just your standard barrel, look at your use case and either shorten a little bit or lengthen a little bit based off of what you want to do with that. So whether that puts you at like a 13.9 or a 14.5 because you want to go a little bit shorter, but you still have the capability to still reach out and touch someone.
Or the barrel you like is
14.5
because it's an M4 barrel or something.
Yeah.
One of the coolest barrels ever. I'm just going to throw out a brand.
Go for it.
The Colt SOCOM.
Yeah.
Been around forever. It kind of defies physics for some random reason, and the other Colt barrels don't have the same reputation as the Colt SOCOM. It's a carbine length 14.5, and it's like sub MOA performance on almost every barrel. And it's just a chrome lined combat like M4 barrel, and it doesn't make any sense because it's getting like crazy accuracy. And so I don't know why that came up right now. It's just in my brain's loading.
Sick.
Yeah, dude. And so like that would be a reason to get a 14.5 because that barrel is just super great and it's an incredible value.
Yeah.
But then anyways.
So if you're getting into twist rates, like
twist rates.
Obviously 1 to 7, 1 to 8. Some people, I've seen some 1 to 9, but I feel like that's like only good for like,
that's like old school.
Was that for like 55 grain in that? Wasn't that the reason why?
Yeah, out of a 20-inch barrel.
Yeah.
So the barrel length and the twist rate are somewhat interconnected.
Yeah.
You can get away with a slower twist rate with a longer barrel because it has more time to twist it. You know.
Yeah.
You just gonna refrain from that joke. And then, but anyways, the gold standard is 1 in 7 and 1 in 8 because that stabilizes every common projectile weight.
Yep.
That is in the AR-15 or the 5.56.
Yeah.
And so basically, faster twist rates are necessary to stabilize heavier projectiles. If you plan to shoot heavy projectiles, 1 in 7 might be the gold standard for you. If you shoot everything and you really don't care and you shoot a lot of 55 grain, which is the like kind of the standard, that's usually the cheapest range ammo is 55.
Yeah.
So 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 would both be just fine.
You want to explain what that actually means?
Yeah, so
like
1 in 7 or 1 in 8.
Usually it's a right hand twist.
Yeah. So right hand is pretty self-explanatory. It twists to the right if you look down the barrel from the back. Don't just like take your whole gun and stare down the barrel.
Yeah.
Counterclockwise.
Yeah.
No, clockwise.
Yeah, clockwise.
Yeah. If you're looking down the barrel.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or looking
up the barrel.
Up the barrel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Towards,
there we go. Up the barrel.
You're looking in the Whoa! Why
in
is
the direction the bullet travels?
Yeah,
Yes,
you're looking
correct.
the same way the bullet is supposed to go.
Yeah.
There you go.
So,
We made it.
No. What?
yeah, should I really be listening to these guys?
Yeah. I'm going to go over to this other one now.
So that means the 1 in 1 to 7 stands for 360 degrees of rotation on the rifling.
Mhm.
So it makes 1 full revolution around the barrel in 7 inches.
Yes.
So the second number is how many inches it takes to make a full revolution. So a 1 in 8 is what we call a slower twist than a 1 in 7 because it takes longer to make the revolution. It takes 8 inches instead of 7.
Yep.
So yeah, 1 in 8 and 1 in 7 is usually the only thing you're going to find on a normal barrel. And
Yeah.
1 in 7 is even more common. So
Yeah.
you can't really go wrong with that.
Yeah. I think it's an important thing to understand. I think a lot of people throw those numbers around and don't
Yeah.
ever actually explain what they mean. But yeah, it's literally like you were just saying, it's all about your rifling.
Yeah.
And it's very important.
Yeah.
But I think kind of going back to what you guys are basically saying, between 1 and 7 and 1 and 8,
Yeah.
you're gonna be covered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So just
yeah.
pick one of those. It really doesn't matter that much. 1 in 8 might be you might get slightly better velocity. So it will, I don't know how much it affects that, but a slower twist rate will allow the barrel, the kind of have less friction as it moves out of the barrel. It won't have to spend as much energy spinning.
Yep.
So you might like that a little better. I don't think it matters that much. And so, yeah, that's twist rates. Pretty simple. Then stainless versus chrome lined.
Mm-hmm.
So chrome lined barrels are generally the most hard use, duty grade.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they last the longest. So obviously your barrel wears as you fire rounds through it.
Mm-hmm.
And so chrome lining is extremely hard. And so and heat resistant. And heat resistant as well.
Yeah.
So heat is the killer of barrels.
Yep.
The hotter it gets,
Heat
the
and friction.
easier. Yeah. So as it gets hotter, it
Stop it.
as it gets hotter,
hot.
it wears faster.
Yeah.
Because that metal starts to soften.
Yes.
To some very small amount. It's not melting or anything, but
Yeah.
it's just not quite as hard as it is when it's cold.
Oh my goodness.
All right, we got to get out of there. Anyways, heat
Hey.
is a bad. Heat's
Oh, yeah.
a bad thing to the barrel.
It's all coming together.
So, yeah, and that heat is generally at the throat of the barrel. It just keeps going.
Yeah.
But so having a heavier barrel profile at that area is going to be able to absorb more heat before it starts to have problems. So
Yep.
you'll end up with a barrel that lasts a little bit longer.
Yep.
So what do you think about government barrels?
The best barrel.
I'm so glad you asked. So, just like the name would suggest, it's stupid. So I guess we are now transitioning into government. I'm sorry.
Well, hold on. Let's finish your thoughts on the materials.
Okay, we'll get to government profile
because we will talk about barrel profiles because I think it's important to understand.
He's excited
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, I'm so excited to hate on that. So, materials. So, chrome lined barrels they last a long time, and that's a reason people get them. And they last a long time, and they do really well under heat. The problem is that they're not always as accurate,
Yeah.
or it's harder to make them as accurate as a stainless steel barrel. And the reason for that is what decides your accuracy outside of the round is the rifling and the barrel,
Mhm.
right? So the rifling needs to be super precise in order to consistently send the rounds to the exact same spot. And so when you machine it, obviously it's really nice if you machine it properly or rifle it properly. And then when you coat those lands in grooves, they introduces some imperfections. And so you just don't have quite as precise rifling when you coat them after you machine them. And so there are companies like Criterion that are almost negligible accuracy losses from a chrome line barrel.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It is.
And I owned one, an 18-inch Criterion hybrid 1-in-8 twist, and it was insane how accurate it was, chrome lined.
Yeah. Best chrome line barrels I think you can get.
Yeah, and they're among the best.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
especially for like the price, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that and then randomly the Colt SOCOM.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make any sense. And then
but harder to find sometimes, and
sometimes they routinely come in and out of stock.
Yeah.
Yeah. So something to look for. They're in stock right now.
Ooh.
Go to Brownells.
Whoa.
They're in stock several places, but yeah. Good.
Dude, you think we were sponsored or something?
Yeah. I'm Larry Potterfield. That's Midway USA, isn't it?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Hi, I'm Larry Potterfield.
Would you like to donate to the
Today
1
we're
cent to the
about
NRA?
The pencil profile barrel.
What are we talking about?
So, okay, so stainless steel.
Yeah, so stainless steel. Advantages are that you do not have to coat the rifling. You don't actually have to coat the rifling on a normal chromoly vanadium steel barrel. The problem is that those are generally not recommended for like duty use.
Yeah.
Because they are easily corroded inside, and like a lot of the stuff that like goes down the barrel is going to corrode it easily, and then you're going to have real bad problems. And then, so yeah, chrome lining protects as well as makes it last longer just due to the heat and the friction, but also corrosion. So
yeah,
I wouldn't recommend a chromoly vanadium non-chrome lined barrel. They're hard to find anyway. So yeah, don't worry about it. Stainless, you also don't coat the rifling, but you don't have to because it's corrosion resistant. The problem is that they're not quite as durable inside, so they generally have a lower round count before they start losing accuracy because of wear.
Yep.
And I could be wrong about this, but I believe heat affects them slightly more.
Yeah.
The wear on them,
and
so I think chrome's pretty heat resistant. Stainless steel is not quite as much.
Yep.
Now we're talking thousands of rounds, so
right.
Generally, there's no round count that is like the round count for all barrels. It highly depends on your firing schedule and all kinds of other stuff that you do with it.
Yeah.
But a general idea is 15 to 25,000 for a chrome lined duty barrel just for normal use. You can make them last a lot longer or a lot shorter depending on what you do with them, but that's sort of an average with a large spread.
Yeah.
And then usually stainless with the same firing schedule and use is like 8 to 10,000, something like that before it starts to lose accuracy. And even then, it's a gray area when a barrel's shot out. It's not just like it turns off. It's like, well, we're going to go ahead and just throw these wherever.
Yeah.
It just starts to lose accuracy, and then you decide when you want to change it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, anyways.
But it will happen with any barrel.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's important to, plan for that.
Yep.
Have a backup barrel.
If you want a gun that you never have to change the barrel, you're going to have to go chrome lined, and you might have to change it anyway.
Yeah. But
and
you'll have to shoot like never, because eventually you'll just have to change the barrel. I mean, that
exactly. You'll have to do it more often with a stainless. But the cool thing about stainless is that it's generally more accurate, and there's generally people only make stainless steel barrels when they're trying to make a really accurate barrel.
Yeah.
So they're generally pretty precisely machined and designed with accuracy in mind. Nobody makes that I'm aware of, don't quote me, a stainless government profile barrel or something, because it just doesn't make sense. You make something that's, we'll get into that, don't you worry.
If somebody does make it, that's probably
they're
not
usually
someone to buy
heavier
from.
profile. They have all this stuff that's conducive to accuracy. And they're cool, but they also don't quite last as long. So it just depends. If you want a gun that's meant to be really accurate at longer ranges, stainless might be a good option for you.
Yeah.
So if you want something that's more hard use and you don't really care that much about very small changes in accuracy at long range, then just go for like a chrome light might be the best choice for you.
Yeah.
Anyways, what was I going to be hating on?
Profiles.
That's right. So, barrel profiles. That is how it's cut concentrically. That's not the right word.
That's basically the shape of the barrel.
Yeah, right. So the length of the barrel is one thing. The shape, when you look at it, is different. So like its thickness or its contour. That's barrel profile.
Girth.
Yeah, girth. Exactly. And so that matters a lot, actually, because there's a thing called barrel harmonics, and that is when every time you fire a round, the barrel vibrates and kind of flaps around if you look at it in slow motion.
Yeah.
And that changes, obviously, where the bullet's going, because it's like shooting it out of a noodle that's moving slightly. So all barrels are going to have a vibration and shock waves that go through it. You can make those consistent, and you can diminish them as much as you can, and you do that with manufacturing and the profile. So having a proper barrel manufacturing means that there's no uneven stresses in the metal that is going to cause it to vibrate inconsistently or change really bad when it gets hot, because barrels do change their point of impact when it gets hot, because the metal expands, and it expands more in places that it's hotter, and so that ends up, if it's expanding in one place and not as much the other because it's not as hot, then you're going to have a point of impact shift, and that's true of all barrels. Minimizing that is usually due to like the metallurgy and the way that you're hardening the barrel and putting it through different treatment processes to make sure it's as consistent as possible. And now the profile is minimizing or making it an advantage. You're sort of minimizing the way that those vibrations can propagate through the barrel in a negative way. So if you really want to get into the weeds on barrel harmonics, what is it? TACCOM HQ, or as a Instagram page and a company, they build like extreme long range sniper rifles and all this other stuff, and they do some crazy barrel harmonics research, and they build their own structured barrel systems and stuff. So if you want to learn about it, they'd be a good place to go, because they get into like all these different like sine waves and stuff that are going through the barrel, and they get really sciencey with it. We're not going to get all that crazy, but
no.
The point is that they exist, and if you want to go check it out, it's cool if you're kind of a nerd.
Yeah.
And so the profile, a thicker profile, means that the barrel can move less because it's much more dense, and the structure of the barrel is, it just doesn't vibrate as much because it's thicker. You can't move it quite as much, and that's good.
It can absorb a lot more heat too.
Exactly. So the barrel harmonics is lessened, or the vibration is lessened of the barrel, which is going to make it more consistent. And those changes due to barrel harmonics are going to be less because the actual vibration is less. It's also going to be able to absorb a lot more heat before it starts to get weird. And when it does change, it's going to change less. And so generally for shooting the gun, the heavier the profile, the better. That's just how it is. But the problem is that gets really heavy up in the front. And so you kind of have to balance what you want weight-wise, or, be able to pick the gun up versus how you want the rounds to go. So you might not be a machine gunner that's like just putting 1,000 rounds through it.
Yeah.
And in that case, you might not see that much improvement from a super heavy barrel. But you might not be able to hold the gun up for like just traipsing around a week in the woods. It's going to be tiring. You're not going to be able to be in a more advantageous position if you're like pulling security or something. Yeah. If you're just a cool guy. So it's something to think about. It's not just like the argument of, well, you need to work out more. if you can't carry this huge H-bar 20-inch, you might not need that. It might not do anything for you. So it's important to think about. However, what is important is where the weight is going on the barrel. And that's where we're going to start making fun of government profile barrels. So, So how government barrels, my understanding of how government profile barrels came to be was back in the olden days, the M16.
The olden days.
Yeah.
Before time began.
Yeah. In the Vietnam War.
The government profile.
Not really. It was pre-government profile.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. The profile the government was using was a pencil profile, basically. So the original Colt, like M16s and stuff, in their old school car. What do you?
Keep going. Sorry.
All right.
Just
they were pencil profile, which means very skinny.
Yes.
Right. So they're super lightweight, which is great. It's a priority that makes sense. I want a lightweight barrel. And I understand that it's going to have ramifications to the heat dissipation and the barrel harmonics to some extent. And I'm okay with that because I want it to be light. That makes sense, right? Just the same way that a heavy barrel makes sense.
You're okay that it's going to be heavy, but you get
I'm okay that it's going to be
benefits
heavy, but I get the benefit of that
point
heat
of impact,
dissipation and
the lack thereof.
barrel harmonics and all that stuff, right? And I'm okay with that. That makes sense. Now we're going to get into what doesn't make sense. So, the government was having issues. I don't know who exactly, if it was the army or something. The military was having trouble with accuracy on some of their guns. They just would have these problems, and they're like, "We think the barrel's bending." Because of bayonet charges and stuff. And so,
that's the reason, though, right? Because of bayonet charges.
Yeah, specifically because of bayonets.
Yeah.
They're like, well, this is bending the barrel, we think. And they didn't actually research that. They're just some guy who said that, and they decided that that's what it was.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. They're like, well, how else is it going to happen?
Yeah.
That would be insane to bend a barrel because of that. You know how hard that would be?
Oh, dude.
Yeah. Because even a thin barrel is still pretty thick.
And
it's made with super strong. The ability to bend it and have it undergo plastic deformation is insane. You might be able to just slightly make it vibrate and bend, and it'll go right back to normal. Yeah. But that's an insane amount of force that it would take. But they weren't thinking about that. They were like, well, whatever. That's probably what's happening because we can't think of anything else. And so, when they decided, they're like, well, we just need a new profile now. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep it a pencil profile at the behind the gas block, between the receiver and the gas block. And then where we mount the bayonet on the gas block to the muzzle device, we're going to make it a heavy profile. And so now all the weight's in the front, and we don't get any of the advantages to a heavy barrel, which are usually near the base of near the throat of the barrel.
Yeah.
That's where it matters most. And so they did that. And then they realized later that you were not bending the barrels.
Yeah.
So they fixed a problem that doesn't exist. They just created the most incongruent barrel profile that is now the most common. That's the profile that most AR-15s come in now. It's government profile because of we skinny where we need all the metal, and then super heavy where it matters most for weight. It's going to just be hanging on. Yeah, so it's the complete opposite of what you want. There's nothing. So
why is so many manufacturers rolling with that? With the knowledge?
Probably because they're all getting barrels from the same. There's a few people that OEM barrels for a ton of people. I know FN makes barrels for a ridiculous amount of people.
There's probably also still existing contract requirements and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And so once the government finds something bad, they're never going to change it. So
they just love it, dude.
Yeah. They probably still think it makes sense.
Like SIG. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, man.
This is going to be an 8-hour podcast.
Dude, I'm just playing.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not going to get into that right now.
So what are good profiles in your opinion to look for? For building a gun that's not dumb.
Yeah. So for one, there's nothing wrong with a government profile other than it doesn't make sense. There are a lot of guns that come with a government profile, and I don't recommend that you necessarily change it. I'm just hoping you understand that
it doesn't make sense.
If you're building it from the ground up, if you're building it and you're specifically bypassing barrels that make sense for a government profile, you're doing yourself a disservice. Yeah, because you're making it heavy in the front while providing none of the benefits of being heavy. Right. So, or at least not very many of the benefits. And so, anyways, something that's heavy profile near the throat, near the receiver, and then lighter out near the front where the weight matters, is something that I would look for. And a lot of people are making those now because they understand like barrel harmonics and stuff, which wasn't really a huge thing back then. Nobody was thinking about that. In the grand scheme of things.
So like the Criterion Core barrels is a good example.
That's probably the best example.
They're definitely, they're sweet. You know, it's a smart design. You know, you put your weight farther back toward the barrel nut, a little thinner up front. All your lights and lasers and stuff like that are getting mounted toward the end of the gun anyway, so you're saving weight down there where, you know, it's just going to be more mobile.
Yeah.
And then also it just kind of, it balances it, but it also puts the weight where it matters on the barrel as well.
Exactly.
So it's kind of twofold.
Yeah. So you get the benefits of that heavy weight right where it matters, and then you save weight where weight makes a huge difference up in the front, or where having a bunch of weight is not good.
Yeah,
but it also doesn't do that much for ballistics, or heat dissipation. It doesn't. Having a heavy profile up there is not as important as having a heavy profile back in the back.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great design. Ballistic Advantage has the same profile going. They're a little bit of a cheaper manufacturer. They make a lot of barrels, and they're sort of hit or miss. Usually hit, but not all the time. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't recommend one as like if you're just building one gun and you want it to be quality. I would recommend getting something nicer. But they do make the Hansen profile, I think it is. It's a similar design to the Criterion. The one thing, they're good barrels. The one problem is that they don't QC all of them, and so sometimes you get these weird guns that just don't quite shoot right.
Yeah.
And then, like, they would have guns that are just keyholing, which is the bullets flying literally sideways through the air.
Yeah, that's not good.
And that's not good. Yeah, that's a big problem. So I would recommend spending a little bit more. Now, Criterion is not that expensive.
It's really not.
No, you can get them for under $300.
Yeah.
And that's crazy because a lot of the bigger names, you know, like Daniel Defense barrels, they do cold hammer forged chrome line barrels, which is like the best of the best as far as manufacturing, so to speak. But they're like $450 or something, or $500 just for the barrel. And then Criterion is out here just destroying inaccuracy, and they're even better.
Yeah.
And they're just half the cost. The downside of that is that they're hard to get sometimes.
Yeah.
You gotta wait till they're in stock. But it's a good thing to look out for if you're interested.
Yeah, and sometimes they'll let you back order. Like, I don't know if they're doing it right now, but they went through a period where they were, you know, like, hey, it's 3-month lead time, but you can order it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's worth doing. So, especially if you're piecing it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And while we're here, we can start talking about manufacturers other than Criterion that are good, because we're just like plugging them constantly. If you can't find them or you don't want them, there's a bunch of other ones that are good. Generally, Colts are good as far as quality. They might not have all the modern features that you want, but they don't mess up.
Yeah.
Really.
They've been doing it for a long time.
Yes, they have.
And doing it in huge volumes.
Yeah, exactly. So if you need a barrel that's inexpensive relatively, and they're not a bad one to go for. It's probably going to be government profile, but that's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
I just might make fun of you online. As I have one. I have a government profile. Or close to it, sort of.
Yeah.
Anyways.
You kind of get a pass, but
we can... We'll talk about that later. Or never. So, Another one would be Centurion. They're a premium barrel manufacturer. They make cold hammer forged. They make non-cold hammer forged chromoly vanadium, and they make stainless, all of which are very nice. They're also kind of hard to get, and they're expensive. Who else? Trying to think. We might have to cut a little bit out while I'm thinking, but that's okay.
Noveski back in the day. I don't know.
Noveski's still.
Yeah, Noveski.
Noveski's probably like one of the most famous barrel manufacturers ever. Shout out to my barrel. They make some of the best. Yeah, boy, Noveski.
And they make those long-lasting stainless barrels too.
Yeah, and they've been making good profiles since before anyone else was making really good profiles.
Yeah.
And they're known for their accuracy. Yeah. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Anyways, you can still get those. They sell them. You just have to get a skateboard with it or something. they have a weird like marketing strategy now where they like appealing to the skater.
They're like American but so Russian, and it's not even funny, dude.
It's just odd. They're appealing to like Zoomer gun culture, which is fine, I guess, but also just can you just release a gun?
Yeah.
Instead of a skateboard.
Make barrels in stock.
Yeah. And anyways, they're starting to be very expensive, and I question why some of the time.
Especially, and again, I'm not trying to just plug Criterion again, but it's like
you can get a good barrel without having to spend that.
Yeah.
They can be back ordered right now, by the way.
Oh, they can?
Yeah, I just looked.
Cool. That's cool. The Criterion?
Yeah.
Black River Tactical makes good barrels, I believe. They're making barrels now, right? They got on the 6-arc train. I know they made gas tubes that are fancy. I'm pretty sure BRT makes them.
Really do your research and pay attention to like the different profiles and the materials that are being used and the manufacturing methods.
Yeah. I've heard good things about Black River. I've used one of their gas tubes before, and I've also seen people with their barrels. They do make barrels. I don't know why I was questioning that for a second. I was like, wait, hold on. Am I thinking of the right company? Yes, they do, and they make them with the gas block and the gas tube all attached and everything, ready to go.
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can take it off and put a barrel nut on and all that to assemble it, but they are known for making really efficient gas systems, and they make really accurate barrels as well.
Yeah,
they're good. Also, who else? I've heard good things about. I haven't used one. Psionics. That's who it is. I don't know if they make their own barrel.
Whoa, I'm not familiar with that.
They made some. They gained notoriety by making really good bolt carrier groups. Really gas efficient bolt carrier groups, and they were kind of like the thing everyone wanted to put in their gun, along with BRT and all this other stuff. But anyways, they sort of got on the efficient gas system train, and they made really good stuff. And now they make whole guns that are actually pretty good.
Yeah.
So that might be somewhere to look if you're looking for a fully built upper that does what you need it to do.
Yeah.
And is like their pricing is really good because they don't have that pull with their name yet. Yeah, where they can just start charging a bunch of money, but they make really good quality stuff from my secondhand experience. So,
what about Thoroughbred?
Thoroughbred makes their own barrels now too.
Yeah,
I have owned one of them, and it was very good.
Nice.
I owned their 15.1 inch. Like SPR profile stainless, and they guaranteed 1 MOA or better, and it more than delivered. It was really, really good. And they make a bunch of them now. They make chrome line barrels, mostly government profile, I think.
Yeah,
for their chrome line. They might expand that later, but they do make really good stuff.
Cool.
And then if you get a BA ballistic advantage, a lot of people put those in their guns with good success. I've seen enough to question whether they're all that good.
Didn't they have a little snafu where they literally sent barrels out without rifling in them at one point?
I think they did. Yeah.
It was like a little bit of a.
I know Roscoe did too. Oh, yeah. Roscoe's another one.
Roscoe. Some of their bloodline barrels are actually really good.
They're not bad. Yeah. They're on the same level as Ballistic Advantage. If you can spend a little more to get a nice one, I'd recommend it. But if it's all you can swing, you're more than likely going to have a decent barrel. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
And then there's also, if you don't want to build a gun, you can buy fully built guns that work really well. Or just upper receivers that are fully built, and that way you don't have to buy the tools. Generally, it's cheaper to do that if you don't have all the tools and like greases and stuff you have to put together the gun.
Yeah.
Just buying an upper receiver that's quality made. Thoroughbred Armament puts together a lot of really good ones from different manufacturer parts and stuff.
What's Geisley running on there?
Geisley's actually pretty good. Like they're
running
really
their own proprietary barrel then.
They do make their own barrel.
Their own barrels. Yep.
Yeah. Right. I don't know how good their barrels are. I've heard good and bad, but most of the first-hand experience I've seen or second-hand experience has been good.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got a guy we shoot with that's got one, and he was out there competing with a lot of our Mark 12 builds and SPR builds and stuff like that.
Yeah. And he's just a good marksman anyway.
Yeah,
which is 99% of...
Yep. He's a really good shooter.
Yeah. We're talking about the 1% of like making a good shooter a little bit better.
Yeah.
But if you're not that good, then it's not going to make any difference.
So pushing a little bit into, unless you guys had anything more on barrels, but talking a little bit about gas blocks and gas system in general. I think that's important to kind of talk about.
Yeah, we've already been brushing over it because it's what attaches to the barrel.
Yeah.
So there's 3 different lengths that have become common. For 5.56 AR-15s, there's carbine length, which is the shortest. It's like the most common because that's what was used on the M4 platform, still used. And then there's
like 7.5 inches or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And then there's mid length, which is sort of a newer, I mean like 15 years old or something.
Yeah,
20 years old. Which is like about an inch or 2 longer.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's probably the most common one for modern barrels, non-M4 platform based, like Criterion and other stuff. Also, the gas system length depends on the barrel length. The shorter barrels, you're going to need a shorter gas system length. Longer barrels are going to benefit from a longer gas system, having to do with dwell time and other stuff like that. We can talk about that in a minute. But and then there's rifle length, which is the original.
The OG.
Yeah, from the M16 20-inch upper receiver. That is a long boy. That's like a 12-inch or something.
Gas system.
Gas length. Yeah, gas system length.
Yeah, carbine length is 7.5 inches and mid length is 9.5.
Mm-hmm. And so what we mean by this length is basically how the operating system works is it's driven by gas pressure from the round that you fired previously. So when you fire a round, there's obviously a lot of the gas pressure is what's pushing the bullet. And then a certain way down the barrel, as a carbine length, it'll be 7.5 inches down the barrel. There is a hole on the top. And then as soon as the bullet passes that area, it starts sending gas back through that hole into what's called the gas block, which just holds the gas tube, and that sends gas all the way back to your bolt carrier group. And then a bunch of magic stuff happens in the bolt carrier group, and that gas pushes it back as the recoil action of the firearm.
Mm-hmm.
Pushes the bolt carrier all the way back into the buffer, and then as it returns, because of the spring, it strips the next round from the magazine and reloads it. That's how it's semi-automatic or, auto feeding. So uses that gas. So obviously it's super important. The size of that gas tube determines how much gas port determines how much gas is getting back. Too much is bad. Too little is really bad.
Yep.
Because you need to have that balance of the right pressure, gas coming back to cycle the action, but not cycle it so violently that you're going to be breaking parts and like blowing it into your face and stuff. And a safe pressure. That's why it has to be 7.5 inches, because it needs to wait until that pressure is at a safe, at a safe level before unlocking that chamber. Otherwise, it's just going to like blow gas back and be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Unsafe. And so, and then there's something called dwell time, and that is the amount of time that gas port is exposed to the pressure, the gas pressure. And that is basically the distance between the gas port and the end of the barrel.
Mm-hmm.
Because the entire time that the bullet is traveling down that area after it's past the gas port is called dwell time. And that is how much time that gas port is exposed to high pressure and pushing it back. Right?
Yeah.
So,
which is really important, and that's where a lot of the tuning stuff has to come into play.
So there's a balance between dwell time and gas port size. Mm-hmm. So the shorter dwell time you have, the larger gas port you have to compensate for that smaller amount of time that it's exposed to the pressure. It has to have more of it.
Yep.
Right? So there's a whole science behind that. And then when you put a suppressor on, that increases the dwell time essentially, because that gas slows down in the can instead of immediately leaving. And then you end up with more back pressure is what they call it. So yeah, there's ways to get around that, but it's something to think about.
Yeah. And I've been asked this question before, and it might sound really like simple, and it is a simple question, but I think it's worth kind of saying, like, I've had people ask, like, how do you guarantee that you're going to get gas up into the gas block and into the tube? Yeah. And the short answer is it's just physics. We basically have trapped energy. The bolt is locked into the chamber. Mm-hmm. So when you fire, the gas is it's trying to expand. That gas is trying to expand. It's trying to do. Yeah. It can't. So it's forcing the bullet down the barrel. That is literally, that explosion is forcing that barrel or that bullet out. Yeah. As soon as that bullet does pass the gas port, because you now have an exit point, all that gas is taking the path of least resistance, which at this point is not pushing the bullet. It's going into that hole. Yeah. But the size of the hole is only going to let in a certain amount of gas, and then that's going to then be directed to run your action. And then that dwell time is so important because, again, energy takes the path of least resistance. As soon as the barrel exits the bullet exits the bore. Did I say the barrel? As soon as the barrel exits the bore.
Whoa. That would be a crazy experience.
Dun, 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 dun. As soon
That's what happens when you take off your barrel nut, like I said to do.
As soon as the bullet exits the bore, now you have a huge open hole, and all that gas is just going to escape out the end of the barrel. Mm-hmm. So as soon as that happens, there's no more gas going back into the gas port at all. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to break it down that way so you can really visualize, listeners can visualize how that's functioning. And that is all super important because that's literally how your rifle cycles. Yep. There's a lot of timing, a lot of mathematics and study that has been put into creating kind of the perfect parameters for that.
Yeah, so exactly. And that's another reason outside of accuracy why you were going to want a quality barrel manufacturer, because it takes a very precise reaming setup to do a proper gas port, and it also takes the knowledge of what barrel length and what gas port size and what gas system length all come together. It's a huge deal. So a lot of companies will end up, in order to keep a gun functioning, they will over drill or oversize their gas ports to compensate, so that if their stuff isn't quite up to spec and isn't everything coming together, the receiver dimensions, the bolt, the head spacing, the buffer system, if all of that isn't made perfectly, the way to make the gun still work is to overgas it. Mm-hmm. Right? And so a lot of times, in order to compensate for less precision in the overall manufacturing, and so that they don't have people being like, well, that gun doesn't work because of this, they'll just overgas it. Yeah. And so then you have parts wear that's unnecessary. You have gas in the face. You have a terrible time suppressing it. Yeah. And so it's just not the best. It's better to have one that's proper, that have done the research and build the rest of the gun to a spec that is able to be run by proper gassing, right? Yep. So, and that has to do with the seal of the gas block to the barrel, the seal of the gas tube to the gas block, the seal of the gas tube other end to the bolt carrier, the gas rings in the bolt carrier, the bolt spec, everything.
Yeah.
The gas key, I'm sorry. Yeah, the gas key needs to be proper. Everything inside has to be proper. And then it has to slide properly in the upper receiver without being too tight or too loose. And it has to interface the buffer tube and buffer inside properly. All that has to be in spec, and the proper weight and the proper tension. And then when it's done, it has to push it hard enough to come back and strip the round and bring it into battery. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
It's not just like thunk, moving. It's like, it's very complex.
Yep.
And if you mess up any one of those, it can completely destroy the firearm, the reliability of it.
Yeah. And usually it'll carry, it's like a domino effect.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to chase down. Like sometimes if you're, system's overgassed, it's like you start going all these different directions to kind of chase it down and figure out like where can I mitigate this or compensate for it, and sometimes it's like, well, maybe we just need to make sure it's gassed properly to begin with.
Exactly.
Which is doable building your own gun.
Yeah.
It just takes a little bit of time and research.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And it's actually not even that much. Because most of the time the biggest thing is to buy from quality manufacturers that have done it in spec.
Yep.
And I've built a bunch of guns and they all worked properly except for like one or two that I had problems because of tolerances that kept stacking on each other and causing problems.
Yeah.
And so if you build it with quality parts, they generally work together and it's pretty good.
Yeah.
Now that being said, it's better to have a little bit too much gas than not quite enough gas.
Right.
Because gas is what keeps the gun functioning, and you can't compensate for not enough gas without like replacing parts. You can cut the gas if there's a little bit too much easily. But gassing is important because when the gun, if it's running just barely on the bleeding edge of reliability when it's clean and well lubed, you're going to run into problems when it gets dirty and that kind of stuff. And they will get dirty. So it's better to have a gun that's reliable even under less than ideal conditions. So don't be afraid of a little bit of gas, but too much can wear your parts.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's a pretty decent transition, so I think we'll just jump into it as far as BCGs.
Yeah.
And then we can talk a little bit about charging handles.
Yep.
Oh, really quick before we jump into that, I just wanted to cover 5.56 223 Wild.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the chamber. Yeah. So that is important. However, most AR-15s are going to be chambered in 5.56 NATO.
Mm-hmm.
If you buy from a reputable manufacturer, it will be able to handle 5.56 NATO pressure. So the difference between 223 and 5.56 is 223 is like the overarching caliber, basically, that 5.56 is based off of. So it's 5.56 is a type of 223 sort of that was built to NATO standards. That's 5.56 NATO. It operates at a higher pressure, and then has other certain aspects of it that make it a 5.56. But it's the same cartridge, basically. So guns that are chambered in only 223 are not necessarily rated for the pressure of 5.56. But if it's chambered in 5.56, it'll be fine for 223.
Yeah.
So anyways, just if you buy from a quality manufacturer, it'll be able to handle that. Also, chamber dimensions are a little bit different. 5.56 NATO is a chambering. That's the most common. It's great because it allows for guns to be run in when they're dirty. It has a little bit of play to allow those rounds to be able to be seated properly and be safe when it's dirty or they got gunk up in there and stuff. So great chambering. If you want to get a little bit more precision or consistent seating of the round in the perfect place in the chamber, 223 Wild is a good option. 223 Wild doesn't mean it's not rated for 5.56. That's just the dimensions. So it's a little bit tighter in there. So it doesn't necessarily operate as well under extreme dirt and grime and other stuff, but it will be more consistent in its chambering. So good to think about. Most Criterion barrels are 2 to 3 wild, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's become very popular, and I think for good reason.
Yeah. So it's also pretty good. Like, it'll run quite dirty, and it'll be fine. I've run a lot of 2 to 3 wilds, and they work great. So you can't really go wrong, but if you want that precision, 2 to 3 wild might be the way to go. Also, Centurion, the owner of Centurion, super cool guy. He was part of the Mark 12 program. And so he actually uses on his stainless barrels the special Mark 12 chambering, which we talked about a little bit on the last podcast.
Yeah.
It's made specifically for 77 grain OTMs, or Mark 262 is the military loading.
Mm-hmm.
And it's super great. It's similar to 2 to 3 wild in idea that it's trying to be as consistent as possible.
Yeah.
And sacrifice a little bit of that leeway inside of there for more consistency. So he does that. It's a little bit different than 2 to 3 wild, but it's the same concept. That's cool too. But anyways,
yeah, that is cool.
That's about it for chambers.
Sweet.
It's good to have your headspace checked.
Yep.
Headspace is the basically the tolerance between your bolt and your chamber when there's a round in it.
Yep.
So that also has to do with accuracy. So,
absolutely.
It also has to do with safety.
Yeah, that's the most important part about it.
So for modern manufacturing and quality manufacturing, it's really hard to get something that's out of spec. So a lot of people don't actually check it, but it's worth it if you're building your own to get a set of gauges.
They're cheap too.
Relatively.
Yeah.
And it's basically a go and no-go gauge. So what happens is you have a gauge that's supposed to be proper, right? And you stick it on the bolt and you put it in, and then if it twists, if it goes into battery, then it's good. And that's for the go gauge. On the no-go gauge, if it doesn't work, then that's good. If you have a no-go gauge and it goes into battery, that means that your tolerances aren't quite right.
Yeah.
Like too loose, I think. And then if you have a go gauge that doesn't go, then you got problems. But anyways, headspace is important. Get quality manufacturing for the bolt and the barrel.
There's a few companies too, like kind of jumping back to Criterion. They will give you the option of adding a head-spaced BCG to your barrel when you order it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, a lot of companies will do that.
Yeah,
now.
Several do.
Yeah,
and then same with the pre-installed gas block and tube. That's all tuned and spec'd out to the barrel. So good. It's honestly, I think the more guns I've built, especially like doing customer builds and stuff, if they're really caring a lot about that, how well it's gassed and just tuned and things like that, it's like realistically a lot of those companies can do it better than I can. So sometimes it's depending on who it is, I think there's a line, do your research on who you're buying from, but a lot of those companies, it's nice to be able to do that and then just button it all together.
Yeah, they'll do it for you, because that way you don't have to have all the gauges and stuff.
Yeah.
Because all the tools that you need to put an AR-15 together kind of add up.
Yeah.
And you end up paying a lot more than you would just buying a gun.
Yep.
However, now you have all the tools to do maintenance, and you understand how the gun works, which I think is super important. I think it's really a great learning experience, even if it's a huge pain to put it together and it costs a little more. You also know every single component on the gun, and you understand how it works better than if you just bought one and it just does its thing.
Yeah.
That's how I learned about how the AR-15 works, is by building a bazillion of them.
Yep.
And yeah, you learn a lot, and it's a lot of fun. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Now we're talking about bolt carriers and bolts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's actually, it's like the heart of the AR-15. It's what decides whether it works or not, along with the barrel.
Yeah.
And so that's a component that I would never recommend cheaping out on.
Yeah.
And I did once, and I ended up with a bolt carrier that did not function, and I had to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And buy a new one.
And in fact, just to kind of further on that, if you are having a lot of problems with the BCG, I recommend just like getting rid of it. I hate to be absolutist like that, but that happens a lot where, I've had BCGs do that, and it's like I keep having little problems. Yep. Gas rings keep popping, or my gas key keeps becoming loose, or, my cam is like out of spec or whatever. There's all these different things, or ejection problems, and like I'm trying to replace springs and you're just like chasing down this thing. It's like at the end of the day, just get a better bolt carrier group. Exactly. It's going to save you a lot of heartache, a lot of frustration. And if you buy from like a reputable person, you're just not going to have problems with that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not here to like start bashing on different companies, but the bolt carrier that I had that did not work properly was an Aero Precision. And it was right in that era a couple of years ago that they had some issues with their bolt carrier groups, and it was kind of a common thing. I don't believe they're at that same point anymore. However, mine, so basically it worked, but only on overgassed weapon systems.
Yeah.
Because the tolerances weren't proper. So I actually sent it in, and they function checked it on their weapons, their 16-inch, AR, and it functioned. And then I would put it on some other guns that were, pretty gassy, like a Daniel Defense.
Yeah.
Which are just kind of known for just having plenty of
gas.
Especially
like those URGI uppers, dude. Those things are gassy.
Yeah. And it worked great in there, but on other guns that were a little more not quite as overgassed, or maybe even undergassed, but I think it was just the bolt carrier. And I tested it in 2 separate guns, both with proper gas, and it was having issues. It was failure to eject sometimes, but mostly failure to just get the new round. It just wouldn't quite go back far enough. And I tried everything I could, and I just couldn't get it to work.
Didn't we have issues with that altogether? Were we with you when that was going on?
Might have been. It was in Alaska.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
because I weirdly remember that, and us moving it around to different guns. And
I think so. Yeah. That's right. And then, anyways, and then I bought another one, a different manufacturer, Fulton Armory, which normally makes M14 stuff, like really high-end Mark 14 EBRs and stuff, but they make a really good bolt carrier group, and it worked great, and it fixed all the problems on all the guns. And so that just like one single component basically decided whether my gun worked or not, and it was the bolt carrier group.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those things too where you start looking at certain manufacturer BCGs, and then you're like, well, I'll just use Aero Precision as an example. Again, I'm not saying that they don't make a good BCG, but if you have one, you're having problems with it, or you're considering getting one. It's like, look at the look at the BCM BCG Bravo Company. It's like $10 more.
It's not that much.
It's like barely more,
and they're solid,
and they are
pretty much
beastly
unilaterally.
Yeah.
Work without issues.
In fact, you'll see them in like sold all over the place, put in a bunch of guns that are built not by BCM. Like going back to the same example for Criterion, like one of the options for an add-on head-spaced BCG is a BCM.
Yep,
BCG.
And the other option is Fulton Armory.
Yeah, yep, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, and then you can get into like how. And this, I don't want to get into this as much, but then you have companies that obviously, like LMT and Knights Armament, who have spec'd out their BCGs to run specifically with their system, and they've really tuned it up, and it's pretty impressive. Like the longevity and smoothness of the operation that they've been able to achieve out of that.
Yeah.
So, but with that comes, the issue of being proprietary. So you want to have the proprietary parts for replacement, but.
And so if you're building your own, you obviously aren't going proprietary parts. And so it's important to have ones that are high quality and work well with the other high quality parts you bought, like the barrel.
Yeah.
So a lot of people get really weird with BCGs, and it was a huge thing back in a few years ago, of like different coatings. And so
nickel boron and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, they got crazy things I've never even heard of. They invented new elements just to put it on a bolt carrier group.
Tin coated.
Yeah. Titanium nitride or something.
Yeah, it was an MP3 or something. Or
NP3. Yeah, and that's still a thing actually. And so there's some things that these do. Yeah, an MP3 is not bad. And what they do is they decrease some friction. That being said, the parts that interface between your bolt carrier group and receiver, the parts that actually touch, are a lot smaller than people think. They're actually quite small. There's some friction on other areas, but it's a pretty small area. Runs on little rails basically.
Yeah.
And so having like a super slick carrier doesn't do that much, especially because those parts are going to start wearing and just be metal on metal at a certain point.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't matter what coating you have. And so what those coatings are nice for is it makes it a little easier to clean. And then some of them can hold lube pretty well, but that's usually like phosphate, the normal coating holds lube really well, but it also holds carbon really well too. And so it aids in cleaning and can do a little bit for you as far as friction is concerned. And even friction from the bolt, like chrome lined bolts and stuff, and it can make them harder and last longer before their finishing kind of diminishes a little bit. So it can do some for you, but it's not very much. So I wouldn't recommend paying a lot of money for a fancy coating on an otherwise mil spec. And you can also introduce problems with that. So if a company's like, we're going to do a chrome or a like weird gold coating thing, and they don't account for that in the tolerance of the bolt carrier, you can introduce problems that wouldn't be there because normal mil spec coating is manganese phosphate.
Yep.
And that's a certain thickness. And if you use a different coating on the same tolerance of metal, you're going to end up with different tolerances between the bolt and the bolt carrier and everything else. And that actually can induce malfunctions if you don't account for it. If you don't, if your coating is a different thickness and you don't account for it in the machining of the part, it can be a problem. So companies that do different coatings and account for that, like Psionics and other guys, I don't remember exactly who, but that's something that might be a slight advantage to you. But what I would recommend is to get one from a quality manufacturer that's made mil spec and to a high degree of quality.
Yeah.
And so that's more important to me than finishes and stuff like that. So yeah, like basically there's so many really tight tolerances that need to go down on this bolt carrier group in order for the gun to function, that it's just important to stick with the tried and true. There are also like adjustable systems, like bootleg carriers that you can adjust the amount of gas that it takes out of the system and stuff. If you have an overgassed gun, it's one way of getting rid of some gas. They've been relatively reliable, but if you build the gun properly from the get-go and you're not like considering just being super efficient, suppressed and all that other stuff, I would recommend like not worrying about those.
Yeah.
Because they just introduce some complexity to the system. Although they do work. So if you do have a heavily overgassed gun and it's the only way that you can think of to fix it, you might try one, but I wouldn't recommend building it right off the get-go before you have serious problems that need to be addressed.
Right.
So that's my recommendation. Companies that make good ones, I would buy the carrier and the bolt all put together.
I agree. Yep.
Because they do their own testing. You can probably get away with putting one together, but you also can introduce a lot of differences in tolerance that aren't accounted for at the factory. So just get the whole thing together. Companies that make good ones, Thoroughbred Armament, of course. Colt, although you're going to pay a premium that I don't feel that you necessarily need to. Those are like $200. And so Yeah.
It's quite a bit when you can get...
A Centurion is probably more efficient than a Colt, slightly, in their gas key tolerance and all that other stuff. And they're like $140 or something.
Yeah.
150. Thoroughbred will also sell unmarked mill contract ones. So they're from a military contractor that will sell it to multiple people to put their brands on.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these carriers are built by the same person. They'll put other people's brands on them.
Yep.
And you can get those for a little bit cheaper. And if they're the mill standard company or whatever, the mill contract, they'll say that. I believe Centurion uses a mill contract, and they have it built for them. They're building their own special like sand cutter copy now.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But I think, yeah. Anyways, that's what I'm running, and it's really, really nice. It's really high quality, and I got it for like $140.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just a normal phosphate. Daniel Defense makes a good one. They're also kind of expensive.
Yeah.
Can you think of any others?
I mean, we already talked about Fulton and BCM. It's honestly they're as far as just being mil spec and standard coatings, the Midwest Industries makes bolt carrier groups that are pretty good.
Yeah, so they're just randomly kind of undersung in the entire.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah, their rails are really good.
Yeah,
and cheap.
They don't really mess around. Like they just make things to good spec and just they don't overcomplicate it. So
absolutely.
I've been pretty impressed with some of their BCGs.
Yeah.
So
if you have an Aero Precision bolt carrier that works, run
it. Yeah.
But I wouldn't go out of your way to buy a new one. Like if you have the option to just buy whatever, I would look elsewhere, just from my own experience. But
yeah.
Why buy something that's hit or miss when you could buy something that's always a hit?
I've seen problems come through the store too, and there seems to be a trend there. And I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say they're from a period where their QC wasn't quite up to par. And
yep. And they'd have gone through some hard times lately, being a Washington company.
Right, for sure.
And being a company that supplies a massive amount of people. So
yeah.
Their output is huge. That also means that their QC can sometimes suffer because there's so many parts are going out the door that they can't do them all.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't recommend buying one of those if you don't have to.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and on that, another company that, and this kind of goes back kind of full circle to everything we've talked about so far, that I'm seeing a lot more of, and understandably so, is Palmetto State Armory.
Yeah.
Just be careful.
They're like...
I'm not going to say it's bad, because I've actually been really impressed with what they charge and what they put out. Like bang for buck ratio is pretty crazy, and I really like their business model. Like their whole business model is literally like, we want to make as many guns affordable to as many people as we can and get as many out there. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's roughly, that's kind of what they're all about.
Yeah. They're getting it out there, but it might not be as nice as you could get. And I think the bolt carrier is something that you would really want to, if you're going to splurge on the barrel and the bolt carrier.
Yeah.
So,
and I think, I think the whole idea of just saving a bunch of money because you can is doesn't fit well into this whole idea.
Yeah. If you physically cannot afford a gun at all, if you don't do this stuff, then do the best you can. But if you're just saving it because you're the type of person that likes to save, it's an elegant thing in other areas, but I wouldn't do it for a firearm.
Well, and we see it a lot in the store. I'll have people come in and like brag on
how cheap they made it.
I got this Palmetto upper for $250.
I'm not surprised.
And I'm just like, I have to kind of be like, cool, dude, But it's like, at the end of the day, man, cool, you saved a bunch of money, but we're talking about legit, very serious. Like this is the tip of your spear.
Yeah.
Like this is life
It's
saving.
like buying an Amazon tourniquet.
Yeah, this is life saving equipment. It's
it's not a good thing to save too much money.
No, it's literally your weapon system.
Yeah,
like it's different mentality needs to happen, I think. But anyways, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah.
Charging handles, kind of.
Oh, dude.
Close out BCG with charging handles. There's a whole array
of charging handles out there. So what are your thoughts on that?
So it's super simple. If it pulls the bolt back and doesn't get in the way, it's a good charging handle. Make sure it's made from 70-75 aluminum. There's a lot of weird cheapos that'll make 60-61 or something, and those are not. It needs to be strong.
Yeah, it does.
And you cannot cycle the weapon without it. If you have any problems, like if it doesn't lock back, you can't run the gun anymore. Basically, there's no way to get that thing back.
Yeah. Very true.
So get a good one, but it doesn't have to be fancy. I used to be super like, I have to have an ambi one, in case I need to use it with my other hand, but it's already ambi because it's on both sides of the gun. Like it's in the back, it's not on the side.
Yeah.
If you're a strictly left-handed person,
I would say, I would strongly advise being a left-handed shooter.
Being a left-handed shooter, get one. If you're just getting one for getting one, there's no need. I feel like if you're gonna, there's a lot of weird ones out there, but it's hard. It's really easy to get a good ambi, so might as well. But I bought some ambis that are a little just wobbly on the one side and just kind of like not my favorite. So I just run a regular non-ambi when I can.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's like a big, like deal, kind of like coatings with bolt carrier groups, is like gas blocking or gas sealing charging handles, because that's the rearmost hole on your receiver that gas can come out. And it'll blow it in people's faces sometimes because that's where your head is. Basically, it's right by the charging handle. And so there are companies that will make ones that are advertised to minimize that by like sealing it or making it big and fat or giving it holes inside to make gas leave. And none of those really work all that well. There are some things that people do. I don't know if it's like some kind of weird like compound that people stick in there. I don't remember what it is, but guys that were in the military they were telling me that they used to like stick, I don't know if it's like super glue on there and make it a tighter seal. They don't actually glue it closed, but they stick something in there that makes it sealed when it's closed.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't remember what it is.
Interesting.
Yeah, people do that to mil-spec charging handles and they work great. So I wouldn't recommend spending $1 bazillion for something that's advertised to be like an SD or like a gas removal system. Like the PRI gas buster, M84, I think it's called. It's a mil standard. Like they deployed those on a lot of guns, and I wouldn't say that they do that much for gas. They do a little bit, but they're also just really easy to grab.
Yeah,
and
it's a good charging handle.
They're a good charging handle, and they're not that expensive. Under $100.
Yep.
So, Radian, Raptor. I'm not a huge fan of the aesthetics, but they are probably the best ambi setup. Yeah, they're easy to grip. They're no nonsense, but they kind of look like a spaceship laser gun thing, which is not my type of aesthetic, but they're good. So there's nothing wrong with them.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of nailed it. It should do what it's supposed to do and do it well.
Yeah.
Avoid any kind of like plastic, like charging handles. Again, like weight saving stuff where it's like all skeletonized and crazy. It's like, dude, no.
It's
very important. They're super light.
Stop trying to make the lightest components on the gun lighter.
It's a very important piece of equipment. All of your remedial action is going to require a lot of manipulation of the charging handle, pretty much. So it needs to be strong and it needs to be reliable. And you should have backups.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is.
I had this weird thing in like the freezing cold, frigid ice, like night shoot that I was at, and I had this weird problem with my gun that it would just seize. I don't know what it was. I think I got some water in the chamber or something, and it froze, or I don't know what it was. But I was having this weird issue where I would have to like, it would get stuck. It would have a soft primer strike or something. Wouldn't shoot, and then it wouldn't cycle, and then it would just be absolutely on there, and I would have to mortar this thing.
Dang.
Now, first of all, mortaring in like 2 feet of snow is not easy. I'd have to mortar it on. I bruised my knee because I was just mortaring it on my own body.
Yeah.
Wouldn't recommend it. But also, you can put a lot of force on the charging handle. So it's good to get a strong one. But
for sure.
Spending money on making it a quality one versus weird gimmicks would be advisable.
And what do you think about it being red anodized?
If the company makes it in red anodizing, it's probably not good. I think actually Radian did one as like a red, white, and blue thing for like a limited run.
Yeah.
It was disgusting. But it's still a Radian, so whatever. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Just don't. So I've seen ones that are like weird where it's like there's no, instead of being ambi and having these weird moving parts, now there's no moving parts and there's no latch. Like Strike Industries. Yeah. If something says Strike Industries or UTG or something like that, like just don't. You don't need to do that. Don't go there. I'm sorry.
That's so true.
I don't care if it looks cool.
And it doesn't actually look cool. No. Sorry. But yeah, dude, the latchless charging handle, I forgot about that. That is dumb. That's there for a reason. And the charging handle bounce is like the most annoying thing to have happening on a gun.
Yeah.
And I hope you're never going to run that.
And suppressed. They also make ones that have like, it's not a latch that can lock, but it just like provides friction and it just rubs.
Yeah. Again, I hope you're not going to run that suppressed because that thing's going to come back and pop you in the nose.
It's like, why do you have to do that?
Yeah.
Just that. When has the latch ever caused someone problems?
It hasn't.
No.
And if it's causing you problems, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Like grab the charging handle and open it and pull it, or pinch it and pull it.
Exactly. We've already spent too much time. Just get a decent one that's not weird.
Yeah.
Don't be weird.
Stop being weird. All right. Rail systems.
You have to buy a Knight's Armament rail system in order to have a gun that works. So,
yeah.
Good luck. You're never going to have a gun. No. So this is not a component that affects the functioning of the firearm.
Yeah.
As far as like cycling. So it's what it does affect is it can affect accuracy.
Yep.
To some extent. And it can affect everything you mount on it.
Yeah.
And it affects the weight of the gun, obviously. So this is basically where you put all the fun goodies on your gun, like a light or a bipod or a grip, or your front iron sight, that kind of thing. So the way that it would affect accuracy is if you have a free floated rail or not. So in the olden days, again, the barrel used to be an integral part of the firearm, a structural part of the firearm. You would mount you're basically just grabbing onto a plastic handguard that is directly attached to the barrel. And then they realized that was kind of bad because it would introduce changes to the barrel harmonics based on what's attached to it or what you're pushing against or how you're grabbing it, and it would change the accuracy based on that. And so to get a better consistent, you want the barrel to not be touching anything.
Yeah.
So it can keep doing its own little just all the time the same way. And so free floated barrels and free floated rails, it's the same thing. Either they touch each other or they're both free floated. So
yeah.
You can't have a free floated rail and not a free floated barrel. Point is, the rail only touches the receiver and nothing else, and the barrel only touches the receiver and nothing else, and the rail and the barrel never touch each other, right? Outside of where they meet at the receiver, and that's it. And that is how most guns are made now. We talked about that at the last podcast. It's better for accuracy, and that's pretty much, you have to go out of your way to build a non-free floated gun now.
Yeah, for sure.
You have to buy a special barrel with a front sight gas block, and that little I don't know what that metal thing is called that holds the front. The back is like the delta ring and all that stuff. Yeah,
I can't remember the actual name for it, but yeah, it's basically just a little collar that
exactly. So
cups.
You have to know what you're doing to build one that's not free floated.
Yeah,
and so you don't really have to worry about it that much. If you're building a clone rifle or something because you think it's cool, you don't need this podcast. Obviously, you already know what you're doing a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's no reason to, from a functional standpoint.
Right.
And so free floated will be cheaper and easier. So go for it. And then there's mounting. There's different mounting types. There's mill standard Picatinny rail. Those are usually the most like just robust and also the heaviest rail systems. I like them because a rail has to be very rigid if it's only contacting at one end and then is completely just in the air. Basically, that's a lot of leverage on a part that's aluminum, and so if the thicker and more robust it is, the less it's going to start like wobbling around and moving around on you, and that comes into play when you have a laser attached to the gun, or a front iron sight. You don't want it to be bent, obviously, and you might think it's like, in theory, it might bend, but it never does. But they do. If you fall on your gun and you have just a lightweight, like little nothing, it will bend. It's not that hard.
Yeah. You also get heat warp too.
Yeah.
So depending on how light and how tight the barrel or the rail is around the barrel, heat's gonna directly affect that, and then you get heat warp, which can throw off your laser zero and things like that. So
exactly. And you can also have this weird, like it just starts to wobble around or not be as rigid if you have a bipod on it or something. And then you can bend it downward and maybe it'll touch the gas block or something, and then you have problems. So there was a thing, probably due to competition guns and how that whole like community has affected the firearm, like AR-15 market. For a while, it was like everybody wants the lightest and the slimmest and the longest rail possible so that they can do this crazy straight elbow C-clamp, just whoa. It's like their elbow's almost higher than their ear.
The fire hose clamp, dude.
Dude, it's crazy. People got wild with that. And that's great for like super speed recoil, for fast running around doing stages and stuff. And people would have really light barrels or really light rails because they don't care if the rail's going to bend because they just take it home at the end of the competition.
Yeah.
And there's nothing attached to it.
Yeah.
It's just there to hold on to, and that's it. For a more combat-oriented gun or a gun that you're going to be using for multiple different things, you want one that's rigid. And so it's more important. But anyways, the whole lightweight, super thin rails became a thing, and now people are starting to move away from those after having a bunch of problems because people are now getting into night vision, and they're realizing that their lasers aren't holding zero and that kind of stuff. With lighter ones. So if you don't plan on using that or doing anything with the rail, like you might benefit from a lightweight one, but more often than not, I wouldn't recommend it if you're going to be, it's a hard use gun.
Yeah.
But that's also situation dependent. So if you want it to be light, you can get a lightweight rail. That's nothing wrong with it, but just know its limitations. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that. There's other mounting systems like Keymod, sick, and then M-Lock, ew. Just kidding. No, so Keymod was sort of like the precursor to M-Lock.
Yeah,
it happened as like a lighter alternative to Picatinny. Was it BCM that invented Keymod? I know that they were the big people that were pushing it.
I thought it was Noveski.
No, I don't think Noveski invented it.
Yeah. No. But it was like a thing there for a few years, and I think M-Lock surpassed it because
Magpul
invented M-Lock, and it's a little bit stronger. But also it doesn't look like a penis.
It's just a thing.
Just look up Keymod. It looks a little weird. Yeah. I don't hate it.
I still rock a Keymod.
Dude, I don't know what that says about me. Yeah, dude. I think Keymod is massively hated on for no reason.
Well, that's because
it's very slightly...
Keymod was developed by Voltor.
Oh, really?
Yep.
That's crazy. Didn't know that. But BCM a lot of used to make them in magnesium. Back when everyone was into the lightweight thing.
Yeah.
They were like, and that people were having a lot of problems with that because magnesium is not very strong. And I think that sort of ruined the reputation of Keymod.
Yeah.
To some extent. When you make it properly, it's not that bad. There's hardly any difference.
No, yeah.
Between M-Lock and Keymod, you're saying?
Well, I mean, a lot of big companies backed it. Like
Yeah.
the fact that Knight's Armament was making URX4s out of Keymod is a big deal.
You still get them.
Yeah.
What takes me down is it just reminds me of a Napa store, dude.
Dude, yeah, you go to Home Depot and everything is Keymod.
It's just pegboard.
What does that tell you? I don't see any M-Lock at Home Depot, buddy. Anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
M-Lock's good, though.
Somebody's screaming the Crane Report right now into their phone or whatever they're listening to this on.
Yeah. No, it's valid, though. I mean, M-Lock is a good system, and it's really up to you. I think... Go ahead.
I would recommend M-Lock because everyone's making stuff for M-Lock now.
Yep.
And that's the only reason. Not because I think M-Lock is innately superior. Yeah. I mean, the majority of the time it doesn't really matter, but most people make M-Lock stuff now because it's more popular, and that's the reason why people buy it.
Yeah. Things to look for, I would say, kind of more features to look for in a rail. As far as the length, like you were just saying, it doesn't need to be like
the entire length of the barrel,
like the War Sport, where it's just
dude.
Remember
Salient Arms?
Oh yeah, Salient Arms.
They made like this weird.
Let's make a crazy muzzle device thing that clicks on and makes the rail longer. Muzzle device
that's attached to the rail. There was a thing where because people were doing that crazy C-clamp grip way up at the top, like basically grabbing the muzzle device almost. That became the thing where the rail has to go to the very end of the barrel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's not necessary.
Yeah,
you can if you want. If you want to mount a light all the way up there, you can. There's nothing wrong with it, but
you just don't need it.
You don't need to.
So yeah, length makes
and it'll be lighter
makes
up front
sense
if you don't.
I think I like, if you're make sure it's long enough to where wherever you want to put your arm, it's going to work.
Yep.
And then still have your controls out in front of it,
exactly.
like your lasers or lights or whatever. You know, it's pretty simple. Something I like to say is you kind of brought it up already, but made out of good materials.
Yep.
I think having how it interfaces onto the receiver is important to look at too.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing.
Yep.
That's one of the most important things to look for is whether it's because that's the one point of contact and it needs to be strong.
Yeah.
That's why everyone's got their own weird little system.
Yep.
Like wedge lock.
Yeah.
Clamp system.
Yeah, and then there's some people will tab their rails and they come in over the receiver to keep it from rotating.
Anti-rotate tabs. Yeah.
But please get a rail that has continuous Picatinny along the top.
No.
Yes. If you're going to unless you're doing, if you're gonna make a clone of something, then I get it. But these new
dude, the amount of people that come in here that
you're talking about the ones that they just chop the Picatinny off the top. Oh, yes. Okay, I 100% agree with you. I was thinking of LaRue and Knight's Armament RAS rails that have the big.
Oh no. Yeah, if you have a transition mounting system for going from your receiver to your rail. I'm talking about.
Don't get one with M-Lock on the top.
I hate to pick on Arrow again, but their rails are everywhere, and they're literally there's a little tiny section of Picatinny coming off the
just
receiver,
enough for someone to cross mount their optic wrong,
and
then it goes away. Thank you.
And then it comes down, and it's got these weird little finger ribs. That are machined into the aluminum.
Extra C-clamp.
And then it comes back up at the end for your backup iron sight. Boop, boop. And you have a little bit of Picatinny.
Yeah.
It's those are so dumb. Yeah. I'm sorry, but what were you going to say, Steven?
I was just going to say, the amount of people that come in here and are regret their decisions for buying a rail like that. It's you barely saved any weight and now you have no ability to mount any of your switches, lasers. I mean, you can, but you got to get super creative after that.
Yeah. And also, we've had it all the time. It's you guys ever have problems with your rail getting too hot to touch?
No.
And it's nope, I don't.
Because I bought a proper rail.
And they're oh. I'm dude, your rail is paper thin and you have no mass to it. And it's as skeletonized as it can be with all this crazy fencing and all of the sections in between your M-Lock interfacing looks like chain link fence, and it looks terrible. And I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but those rails, I get it. They're made to that's a spot that people can save a lot of money when building a rifle.
Mm-hmm.
They make them out of thin, cheaper materials instead of machining all that Picatinny on top, which is time consuming and things like that, and actually doing it to spec and everything where it lines up properly and it's not truly monolithic, but so it's all spaced out properly.
Yep.
That's time consuming and it costs more money to do.
Mm-hmm.
So to save, a lot of companies save cost in the rail.
Yeah.
And the rail is actually pretty important.
Yeah. It's the more important. It's more important the more stuff you start putting on the gun. And most of the time you're going to want stuff on it if you're from the 21st century.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Anyways, yeah. So you actually don't have to spend that much to get a good one.
No, you really don't. Yeah.
So like great companies, Midwest Industries for the price.
Yeah.
Really good.
Mm-hmm.
They're very simple. They're made well. They don't have any weird frills, and they don't look dumb. They don't do stupid like triangle spaceship cuts all over them to make them as light as possible.
Yeah.
They just cut holes that allow heat to dissipate.
Yep.
Perfect.
Whoa.
Yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
And it looks way better.
Yep.
That's objective.
Yeah, that's true. But
it's not my opinion. It's fact.
You'll find the more you get into it that you'll become more. I think you'll become more attracted to the
classic
practical aesthetics, rather than the
form follows function type thing.
Yeah,
that's my opinion. But then again, if you're listening to this, you're probably not building a gun just so it looks cool. You want one that's functional.
Yeah,
and the Midwest Industry does that. Centurion,
if you've made it this
that.
far, and your goal is still to make something that looks super crazy and cool, then I'm surprised. But
DM
BCM, BCM makes really good rails.
Absolutely.
Fantastic rails. So that's another good company.
Centurion and Midwest make rails that drop right into a mil spec M4 or AR-15 barrel nut. And so the barrel nut is what attaches, not only does it clamp the rail to the receiver, but attaches the barrel to the receiver. It's like the connecting point between both. Most of the time you're going to have a proprietary one that comes with the rail, and then you have to disassemble the gun to put it on, or just have an unassembled gun and then put it on there and then attach the gas block and all this other stuff in the right order. But if you buy a gun or a rail like the Colt SOCOM that comes with a front sight post and an AR-15 mil-spec barrel nut already attached, you can use a Centurion or one of the Midwest rails, one of the models, to clamp right on that. You don't have to change anything.
Yeah.
And that's nice, especially for people that already have a gun that's not free-floated or whatever, and they want to change to a free-float. You can just pop that thing off and pop it back on with no weird work that you have to do. That's cool, but it's not that huge of a deal if you're building one. So
right.
Noveski makes really good rails. You're going to pay a lot.
Yeah.
But they're good.
Yeah. Geisley makes good rails.
Yeah.
The ripcord rail is sick.
Oh yeah, the ripcord rail is really cool.
We got to mess around with it when Ty was down here. When he came on the podcast, we went shot with him. He runs obviously that rail, and
it's nice.
Yeah,
I might be getting one here soon.
I used to recommend LaRue, but he just changed his prices because he's on crack to insane. They're like $500.
What?
Yeah,
the LaRue rails.
They're $400 or $500 now a pop, no matter what size you get.
Huh.
It's crazy. And there's no reason to do that.
Wow. Honestly, I've been really impressed with the Centurion rails. I've been looking at them more and more, and they're really cool.
Yep.
And they've got like kind of an OG aesthetic to them.
Yeah. And also randomly, CMT, cross machine tool.
Yeah.
Their little clamping mechanism for the rails is top notch. Really good.
Yep.
And then also the forward controls design. I think that's what they call themselves. Anyways, they make some good parts. Some of their stuff, it's like not necessary to spend that much.
Yeah.
But also they make a pretty cost-effective rail that's based around the CMT mounting design.
Yeah.
And it's the thickest M-LOK aluminum rail I've ever seen. It's incredibly strong and robust. It's called the RHF, I think.
Okay.
So if you're going for M-LOK and you want something that's cost effective and looks really good, and is super rigid, that it's hard to beat that. It's like $240 or something.
Oh, that's not bad.
Let's see, RHF. I'm looking it up right now.
Okay, while you're looking that up, you can't talk about rails without talking about Daniel Defense. Daniel Defense does make some absolute beast, awesome rails.
They also
are
make
expensive.
some garbage rails.
Yeah, they do. But if you're sticking to like any of the Riz stuff, are good, you know. And that new rail that they make is really cool. What's the name of that? Refresh my memory on that.
The RIS 3?
RIS 3, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's let me see it.
So it's got the circle cuts, kind of like the Knights Armament RAS. The CMT mounting design. I used this to build a friend's upper receiver, and I was super impressed with it.
Yeah.
But I would buy one for sure, and I'm a huge rail snob.
Yeah. But yeah, Daniel Defense, I mean, they've won contracts and all kinds of stuff, and they make absolutely beastly rails.
Mm-hmm. They make some of the strongest rails there are. They are heavy, for a good reason.
Yeah.
But they also, some of the weight is something that you'll probably never use, which is the ability to take it in half and mount an M203 grenade launcher underneath.
Yep.
And so that adds some weight with bolting and all this other stuff to be super rigid, because you can do a free float M203, which is insane.
Right.
Then what I would steer clear from is their V7 rails.
Yeah.
And they're like non-government oriented rails. They're
more
really, really
based.
thin.
Yeah.
And they're not innately lined up by their attachment method. Yeah. You have to torque like 4 different screws just perfectly. I could not, it's just such a pain.
Yeah. And honestly, if you're wanting something that's got more of that profile, more lightweight like that, BCM.
Yep.
It's going to be a little bit cheaper still, and still very strong. They are thinner. BCMs are thinner. It's a thinner rail.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, or Midwest Industries.
I'd say Midwest
or BCM are going to be better than like those V7.
Their rails are basically the same
series.
Yeah.
But any of those mill standard or like their mill contract, I guess I should say, like the Riz rails
RIS 3,
from Daniel Defense are going to be great.
Their M4A1 rails are pretty cool.
Yeah.
They're similar to the RIS, but a bit lighter, and they're one piece.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
And they also make that rail that goes forward of the A2 front sight. So if you are
the RIS 2 FSP.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they also do the M4A1 and FSP.
Oh,
as does Centurion and Midwest.
Okay.
So they all do them.
Oh, sweet.
With or without.
Which is cool, because if you're someone that's still dealing with an issued weapon, usually there's a little bit of leeway on modifying your issued rifle. Most units will allow you to do it within reason, and a rail is something that you can do.
You don't have to modify the firearm outside of taking off plastic things. You can just put right back on.
Yep.
Or the non-free float like RAS rail.
And then another rail that we kind of already mentioned, but we got to come back to it, is Knights Armament.
Knights Armament.
Any of the URX rails are going to be fantastic.
Yeah. You can find them.
They are hard to find. Tanks, dude.
They're great rails. They're randomly not very heavy somehow, but they're super strong.
The greatest M-LOK rail is the URX4, and I will die on that hill.
And it is a chonky boy. And it is awesome.
Yeah, it's wide enough to not get all the heat from the barrel.
Steven's making a face.
Dude, I think Ripcord's onto something with their rail, man. I think it's gonna. Cool. I think it's gonna. No, I'm just. It's gotta give it. You gotta give it time, because obviously it's still, if you look at the grand scheme, it's still very new.
Yeah,
but
no, they've done a lot of cool things with it. But that URX4, I think, is just.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's better. I'm just saying, it's been around a long time.
Yeah, so it is wide enough, though, that you're not getting much heat.
Yeah, it dissipates heat. You can run a suppressor underneath it if you really want to, a 1.5 inch. It's robust, and it's not just an extruded 6061 rail. They use their own proprietary alloy, and they make it very strong.
Yeah.
So it's a different construction than a lot. They won't tell anybody what it is.
Yeah.
So.
And their coating's all secretive too.
Yeah.
But also that rail has an integral barrel nut.
Removes 1 point.
Pretty crazy.
So. Yeah.
And it works good. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt to install, but
that's not the point though. It should
nice.
Be good.
That's what I have on my SR15.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And I'm really happy with it. But yeah, there's a lot of rails out there. Honestly, if you went with any of the companies we just listed, you're going to be safe. I would, if we didn't say them, then we probably don't like them.
Voltor makes good ones. There's a lot of good ones. But
so that's not necessarily true. But look around at what a lot of the like professional user base is using.
Yeah.
And just pay attention to that. Doesn't mean you have to get that, because again, going back to kind of what I said at the beginning, you don't need to just copy paste what someone like Grantham is doing or whatever. But
it gives you something to look up and start researching.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
and if you want like all these options again, or if I'm just forgetting some, you're more than welcome to message me. On the gram, and I'll give you a list that you can keep, or if you're, or if you have a specific use case and you're not sure what to pick, I'm happy to help if I can.
Yeah.
I nerd out on rails a lot.
Yep.
So
moving out of the upper receiver, we have one more thing to talk about, and that is muzzle devices.
Oh yeah. So
we'll just briefly talk about it. There's not a whole lot to say, honestly.
Yeah, not a whole lot to say. There's two main categories. There's brakes and there's flash hiders.
Yep.
Flash hiders are legal in most states, not all of them. So some people won't ship them to you. I know places that will. So we live in a state that is very lax. Like there's no regulation on muzzle devices, which is great. That's how it should be, because it doesn't do anything. It's the stupidest thing to regulate.
Yeah, it's retarded.
Because all it does is like lower a little bit of flash and not make it like damage night vision units, and makes it a little bit harder to like see a giant fireball when you're firing.
Yeah.
Which has never been an issue that's caused crimes or like criminals to get away ever.
Yeah.
Same thing as suppressors.
It's just your
like
typical
never used in
legislative ignorance.
Exactly. Yeah. So I would recommend a flash hider, because obviously the AR-15 does not have a lot of recoil, and the point of a brake is to minimize recoil. And so the reason a brake would be effective is if you're planning on suppressing, it can act as a sacrificial baffle and increase the life of your suppressor.
Yep.
But as soon as you take the suppressor off, it's kind of a pain, because it's just this
huge
fireball, really loud, annoy everyone around you for no reason, because it doesn't have any recoil anyway.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to suppress, throw an A2 birdcage on it for super cheap, or get yourself a 3-prong flash hider or something. Yeah. No worries.
Yeah, and basic things there, like, again, I think I agree, flash hider, unless you know for certain you are going to suppress and that's your goal, and you're going to, like, a good example would be like an SPR profile, like a Mark 12 barrel. Like that barrel is designed to have a brake, but it's also designed to always have a suppressor on it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
if
it's something like that,
of this,
and then, or like if you have like a Surefire brake and you run an RC2, that's a can that can be on there for hundreds of thousands of rounds.
Yeah.
So sick.
You'll have to replace a few barrels before you have to replace a suppressor.
Yeah. So again, that's where your brakes are going to work good. Compensators are, I think, I used to kind of like compensators. I liked the idea of it, but recently I'm very, I think they try to do both, and it's just a compromise of both.
The A2 acts as a compensator slightly.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have any holes at the bottom, which keeps dust from being kicked up quite as much. It'll still get kicked up a little bit, but it's not actively trying to kick it up.
Yeah.
And as a result, gas is expelled upward, which can lower muzzle rise a little bit. So it does act as that. But you probably won't notice it because it doesn't have any recoil anyway. So it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. If you're building like a race gun or something, then sick. Yeah. Put a JP Enterprises crazy brake on there
the tank
distance.
But, and then block me.
Yeah. But yeah, if you're building a fighting rifle, something that is kind of for this whole modern Minuteman perspective, then a flash hider makes the most sense. And then beyond that, the other thing I'd say is you should be trying to suppress this. I think that just if you plan on fighting at night, you even in the day, if you plan on fighting with a modern rifle, I think it should be suppressed.
You're doing yourself a disservice by not.
So plan accordingly. If you want to get a suppressor, then get a muzzle device that will, or a system that will work with a suppressor.
Yep.
That's why we're huge fans of, or at least I'll speak for myself. I'm a big fan of Surefire devices.
Yeah.
They make great devices.
Yep.
And they make good cans. But there's a lot of people you could go with.
There's a lot of people that you can adjust the back of the suppressor. They can like put in whatever end, rear end cap hub device that you want.
Yep.
One of the really popular ones is like the Plan B system from Q, or at least they're the ones who like sort of redesigned it, the taper mount system.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people now use that platform. Like Rearden Manufacturing makes really good muzzle devices. Forward Controls makes good ones.
Yep.
What was that other one?
Silencer Co. makes pretty decent muzzle devices. They're kind of like they remind me a lot of AAC, old AAC stuff.
Yeah, they do. But I think they based their one of their mounting systems off of the old AAC design.
Yeah.
You gonna bring up Knight's Armament?
So no. They make super sick cans that really hard to get, and they're like $1,700, $2,000 almost if you count the cost of the
tax
thing.
stamp,
and that's like almost double the cost of a Surefire, which is not a cheap suppressor.
Which also took the SOCOM contract from Knight's Armament, so that's worth considering.
Exactly. Yeah.
And their mounting interfaces.
Yeah, it's like a $200 muzzle device. It's crazy.
Yeah, like what is that? Is it the MAMS?
The MAMS?
It's like $400.
You can't even find them.
No, you can't.
It's dumb. So that's like that's the point where it's really expensive. It doesn't give you any advantage. If you have a Knight's Armament and you're into it and you want their suppressor, then like cool. You don't need us. You're obviously better than us.
Yeah. Hello, Trey. No, just kidding.
Please love me. Give me an upper. Okay.
You have been blocked.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, everyone go buy Knight's Armament. Trey, if you're listening to this, I love you.
Anyways, yeah. I think there's a lot better. Well, I think there's stuff, especially when you factor in cost and availability, you can absolutely get something better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's hard not to mention Otter Creek Labs.
Oh, yeah.
They're like a newer company. Just a homeboy in Kentucky that's just destroying the suppressor market by making some of the best suppressors ever for cheap.
Yeah.
Really
so
cheap.
Sick.
And they have good durability and impressive silence capability. And they make the OCM.
Yeah.
Which is like a Mark 12 thing.
Yeah.
Go listen to the other podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're making some really cool stuff, and it's very affordable.
Yeah.
I would absolutely buy one. So anyways, apart from that, now let's get into the lower.
The lower.
So.
All right. We'll see you guys for part 2. No, I'm just kidding. We're pushing through, guys. Buckle in.
A lot of the same things that make an upper receiver, that we like about upper receivers and what we recommend about upper receivers, transfers very nicely to the lower receiver. They're also forged 7075 aluminum. You can get billet. Billet makes slightly more sense than it does on an upper with a lower, but I still like forged. The reason it makes more sense is because you have more control over the ergonomics. So it's hard to make a forged ambi compatible. So a lot of times if you need an ambidextrous, if you're left-handed and you need the bolt release on the other side or a mag release, you can do that with a forged pretty easily, but the bolt release is a big deal if you're left-handed. Now, it's not the end of the world. A lot of left-handed people just learn to use the components on the wrong side for them, and it's not that hard.
Yeah. You just run like a maritime.
Yeah, just run a bigger. Yeah, you can reach it with your other hand, and all that kind of stuff. But if you want an ambi, usually you have to do billet. And now this is not a component that undergoes the same amount of high stress that an upper receiver goes into, and as such, it's not as important that it be like the world's most durable component.
Yeah.
However, I would recommend it anyway.
Yeah.
One thing that bugs people that isn't really a huge concern is how tight they fit together. the upper and the lower.
Yep.
It doesn't have anything to do with the performance of the gun unless it's insanely loose.
Yeah.
And then you just have trouble aligning the buffer system with the bolt carrier as it travels. But it's pretty hard to do that.
Yeah.
So if there's a little bit of wobble in it, your gun, there's nothing wrong with your gun. It's just pretty normal.
Yep.
Between the upper and the lower. I wouldn't worry about it. It's not going to affect accuracy, nor is it going to affect function.
Mm-hmm.
So it bugs some people. So if it bugs you, get a set from like Centurion or I don't know if BCM makes sets.
They do.
Geisley makes sets, and they'll make sure that they fit tight. Yeah. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of people make sets that you can get.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is one exception though. If you really want forged and you really want ambi, it's pretty hard to look past LWRC. They make a pretty sick forged low receiver, and it is
beautiful.
M16 pocketed, which is pretty cool.
We'll get into trigger cuts.
Yeah.
And Knight's Armament, if you hate money, you can go ahead and buy one of those.
The E3 lower.
They're so cool.
But you
they don't offer
you can't lock the bolt
special
on that side.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Whereas the LWRC you can. It's basically got a bolt latch on both sides, which is pretty cool.
LMT Mars is a forged ambi. They're really, really good. For a while there, they had some weird QC problems because they're like supplying half of Europe in Australia with guns. I think, is it Australia or New Zealand? I think it's New Zealand.
Okay.
That they're making their new gun, and then like some other countries in Europe.
Whoa.
And so they're like contracted out. And so a lot of the stuff that they were passing off to civilians was stuff that didn't make the cut.
Okay.
And so you ended up with like lowers that wouldn't seat a mag. You couldn't even fit a magazine in it.
No.
And stuff where the thickness on both sides were different grossly, and they just don't fit very well. And they had this weird stuff. I think they're pretty much over that now.
Nice.
So it's safe to start buying them again. But just be wary of that.
Yeah.
So anyways, those are cool for ambi. Also, any billet, like Radian makes a good one. I think it's ugly, and it's way overpriced.
ADM
is
UIC
probably like
is sick.
Yeah.
Especially,
UIC.
I think it's the UIC M4, and it doesn't have all the fencing on it.
Oh, it's a different, hold on, yeah.
Or the ADM M4 or something. I don't know. But it's
sick,
just like the UIC, but it's got the same controls. That's probably my favorite billet lower on the market.
If I had to pick one.
But it's and ADM is American Defense Manufacturing. And they're just smashing about over in Wisconsin, dude. They're a pretty cool little company over there. But
here it is. So the ADM UIC is the one with the like weird markings on it.
Yeah.
The ADM 4 stripped lower receiver is the one that's like clean aesthetic.
Yep.
While still having those components. It's a really cool upper.
Yeah.
I would recommend it.
Lower, yeah.
Whatever.
They do make an upper too that matches with it, but I think it's also billet. So, which is cool if you want to do that.
Yeah, so done with ambi, forged, sick.
Yeah.
The best.
The best.
You can get them from a lot of places. Let's see. I have a PRI. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because they're kind of hit or miss in their tolerances. Not to the extent that would hurt anything, but just they're not as like tight, and sometimes they have like dings and nicks on them. I don't care about that. I just think it's a cool lower.
Yeah.
They make an M16 pocket, which of course we'll get into. But what else? BCM, of course.
Yep. BCM's just going to be on repeat. Like,
yep.
Sorry. I know, again, there's BCM haters out there and they get tired of hearing about it, but too bad.
Sons of Liberty Gunworks.
Oh,
make a good lower.
Yep.
Centurion is like my favorite because it's so understated. Like, it doesn't have huge logos everywhere, and they do a proper pocket. Their anodizing is really nice. It's not too shiny. What else? Mega Arms, I think. It's like a subsidiary of Zev. They're okay if you get a forged one. I mean, there's nothing special about them, but I think they make them to a good machining spec. So you can get those. Aero Precision. They're not bad at all. They don't do a fancy trigger pocket or they don't do a proper trigger pocket, but they are cost effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not as, it's not as imperative that they be perfect in every way as an upper. So there's nothing wrong with those. A lot of people run those and they're good. And they're easy to find. What else? For another one with a properly cut trigger is Ohio Ordnance. They make it pretty cool, and I haven't ever seen one in person, but I've almost bought one like 4 times. I want it so bad.
Yeah.
They look cool. Yeah. And what I mean by proper trigger pocket, we're going to get into a little bit of history.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So, the assault weapons ban. So, okay.
Gay.
Yeah. Way back in the day, machine guns were the same as every other gun.
Yep.
Right?
Back in the good old days.
Yeah.
Anytime somebody says the good old days, that's what they're talking about.
Exactly.
That period of time.
Irregardless of what they're actually talking about, that's what they really mean.
That's what they mean, yeah. Even if they don't even know it.
Yeah, thank you, Ronald Reagan. Was he the guy that did that? Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was part of the whole, like, pushback against, like, gang violence and drug war and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for nothing. Anyways,
you were the chosen one.
Yeah, he's like, take away their machine guns and then sell crack.
Yeah.
What? Anyways, probably make some enemies there. But yeah, so machine guns became illegal without an SOT, like a special manufacturer license thing, which is you can't just get as a normal person.
Yeah.
So then after that, the assault weapons ban. Thank you, Bill Clinton. He was the guy with the assault weapons. I'm just double checking my facts, so I don't sound like a moron more than normal.
In the 90s.
That's right.
I did not have sexual relations.
Yeah, did.
But I did do the assault weapons ban.
Yeah. Anyways,
I knew about that for a long time. I was talking to him and we were discussing it, and I was like, Bill, you can't be doing that. You know, when we were at Bohemian Grove together and he caught me in there with my pants off, you know.
Bohemian Grove.
Yeah.
I felt like Alex Jones was here with us.
And we were looking at it. They were worshiping it. They were doing weird things. We were running around in circles, and they had little fancy hats on. And it's like, what are you talking about?
Dude, that guy. He might be my favorite person. They brought out
2 male frogs.
Yeah.
You do the math.
Oh, man.
That was great.
I did not expect that to emerge, but it did.
Transcendent. What were we talking about?
The assault weapons ban.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, basically, to comply with these companies, so that the
why'd you do it, Bill?
Stop!
I made the Patriot Act. I'll be heading on down to Texas now. Thank you.
No. Strategery.
Whoa, watch out for that shoe.
Oh no!
It's not rocket surgery, America. Save me.
Stop me. I can't.
Stop me.
To Obama.
Oh.
It's too much.
Now, I think the assault weapons ban actually was pretty good. It had attributes that are attached to using long phrases and long pauses and sounding intelligent. But not doing so. Yeah.
Why is that somehow good?
And then you can't do that without getting into Trump. I think the assault weapons ban was just... It was undersided. It was. I said it was bad.
Many people have said
this. Back in the 90s, I said it was terrible. It's a horrible idea. We shouldn't do it. It's bad. It's horrible. Worst thing we could do. I said, Bill, what are you doing? America's going to hate you.
All right.
I'm
done. Whew. Sorry.
What an episode. Where? What on earth was I talking about?
This whole weapons ban.
I'm out of breath and I wasn't even talking. Okay, assault weapons ban. Pull it together. Okay. So
terrible impersonations.
they were good, and that's what made them scary. I was terrified. You thought I was laughing. I was shaking. So, yes, assault weapons ban. Give me a minute here. I gotta pull myself together.
So we were in the history.
Oh, yes.
We had the
assault weapons ban.
Assault weapons ban in the 90s.
Can I say that? So
which is separate of the NFA, the National Firearms Act, which has its own history. But
exactly.
Okay,
so
back on track.
We did not back then have the same culture of non-compliance that we do now, and are continuing to improve upon. Meaning, make it more non-compliant.
Thank you, National Rifle Association.
Yeah, we need to stop simping for them.
Yeah,
they've been supported. Every major gun control legislative act has been supported by the NRA, not fought for by the NRA.
Yep,
they've fought for it as long as it made them money, and then they ended up supporting it later. So,
if you don't believe that, look into it. Please do. Please do your research. There's a lot of issues, and it just more and more keeps coming out. A lot of corruption with the NRA.
Yeah.
So, and this is coming from someone that paid for a lifetime membership as a young, dumb person. So, trust me.
Because we're looking for people to fight for us,
and
they're not the ones. So, Anyways, I hate the NRA a lot, like very different reasons than the leftist would hate them, but I still hate them.
Yeah. You should never compromise with rights. Like, you should never leverage rights to save. Like, that's kind of what they do. They're like, well, we'll give you this in order to kind of like save this.
The whole chestnut checkers argument has got you nowhere.
Yeah.
It's always one next step.
Yep.
And then one next step. And then before you realize it, they're just leftists that are 2 years behind.
It's just an erosion. It's a continuous erosion. There's no putting it back. So usually.
Yeah. Anyways.
So
we're gone again. Here we go. Okay. Assault weapons, but we did not have the same culture of compliance. Companies really wanted to comply with this, and they went above and beyond the law to do it. So machine guns were illegal, right? And so assault weapons were illegal. And in order to make these compliant, and then above and beyond compliant, impossible to make non-compliant by the average person, right? And so they would do these. Colt did this thing where they would make these huge trigger pins that were oversized so that you could not put a normal M16 trigger in the lower. They also did different trigger cuts that would make it impossible without machining equipment to put in a sear. And these are all things that you had to go out of your way to do, right?
Yeah.
Just cutting a normal receiver was the standard up until then. It's called an AR-15 cut instead of an M16 cut. So basically what you're doing is making it impossible to do it, make it full auto without machining it. And then when that didn't work and people found a way to actually make them, they found ways around that. And then the company was like, we're going to take it the next step, and we're going to raise the shelf of it and make it completely impossible for the next thing that people were doing to play with their guns. And then they would like pin the press on fake flash hiders, because flash hiders were also illegal.
Yeah.
And do all this weird stuff. But now that assault weapons ban ended in 2004, or was it sometime in the early 2000s?
Yeah.
I thought it was a 10-year thing, and then it gets renewed if they wanted it. It was like an interim.
It might have been.
And did not get it did not get extended because no one liked it, and it didn't do anything to stop crime. So violent crime, and so some of the
2004.
Yeah. Yep. So some of the trigger cuts you see nowadays are vestigial aspects of lowers that came from the assault weapons ban that they just never fixed, like putting a proper trigger cut in.
Yep.
The M16 trigger cut is the correct cut for a lower receiver. It does not make it full automatic. You still have to do stuff to make it fully automatic.
Yep.
But people still make their receivers with an AR-15 cut for no reason. Probably because it's just easier.
Yeah.
And it's just lazy, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Make a proper trigger cut. Be an American.
Yeah. Be true to the original design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I look for companies that do a proper trigger cut because it tells me something about them.
Yeah, for
They're
sure.
willing to go the extra mile.
Yep.
And they don't compromise on rights as well as machining. So,
yeah.
anyways,
it's pretty awesome.
It's sick.
I think it does.
Mm-hmm.
Like someone that's willing to do that and is going the extra mile to do that, I think it's also going to inform, it'll allow you to assume a little bit about their quality as well.
Yep.
You know?
If they're willing to do that extra machining that no one's ever going to use.
Yep.
Or if you want to build like a clone rifle that has a full auto hammer without the sear, like a lot of guys will do that. They'll do everything except for the sear because they want it to be perfect. You cannot do that with an AR-15 because they leave a bunch of metal in that don't want to allow it to exist.
Yep.
And so, it's just not being lazy about the trigger cut. And it's completely legal to cut a trigger M16 style.
Oh, yeah.
But people still don't do it.
Yep.
So it's like, why are you the one doing the government's job for them?
Yeah.
Just machine it proper.
Yeah.
Anyways, rant over about that. Companies that do a proper trigger cut are Geisley, PRI, Ohio Ordnance, Sons of Liberty Gun Works, and also Forward Controls, I think, did one with
Centurion.
Yeah, Centurion does it. Thoroughbred Armament does it to an extent. They do a low shelf, which is like the same, basically. It's just not the exact. LWRC does a proper one. Most of the other companies do not.
Yeah,
there's some others.
Randomly some really cool companies that just don't.
Yep.
Like I don't. Maybe I need to check. I don't know. Maybe I'll try to look it up in a second, but I don't think BCM does.
They do not.
And I don't think Daniel Defense does.
Nope, Daniel Defense. Well, Daniel Defense are famous bootlickers.
Yeah, exactly.
For one. They care about government contracts a lot more than they care about, the average
people.
person. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Knights Armament, unfortunately.
I know.
And they make a lot of full, like, proper trigger cuts. They have all the machining they need to do it.
Yeah.
They just physically don't.
Yeah.
When
Mainly
LWRC
for
does.
the commercial market.
Yeah. LMT doesn't.
LMT does not. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways.
Or LMT doesn't, right?
They do not do a proper trigger cut. So
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Which is really a bummer because LMT and Knights are very, very highly regarded as among the best you can get.
Yeah.
Especially for duty purpose or like a heavy use gun.
Yeah. And they originated doing government contracts and stuff. And they made all of theirs the proper trigger cut, which means they had to go out of their way to make an AR-15 cut.
Yeah.
And so
I know their
like,
SR-16 lowers obviously are, but
why don't you just make all of them like that and don't drill the hole?
Yeah, just come on. Like if Trey, again, if you're still with us, just do it.
Still with us.
If you're still listening.
Yeah, I'm sure he is.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah, he's taking this much time out of his busy schedule to listen. Yeah. And thank you for listening. And please
send us
just
all
make
SR-16s. I will say everything good about you.
Yeah.
I love AR-15 trigger cuts. No, I'm just kidding.
No.
Anyways,
just make
it's a small thing,
yeah.
but it hangs me up a little bit. It's like it's completely legal to do, and it's the proper trigger cut.
Yeah.
And it makes it lighter. You're out here making all these lightning cuts. Why don't you just machine some from inside?
Yeah, there you go. It's actually got a purpose behind it.
That's right. Anyways, that rant is over.
Triggers themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Since we're talking about trigger pockets.
Yep. Depends on what you want to do with it, but there's no reason to not have a match grade trigger.
Yeah.
Because you can get them for super cheap. Centurion, LaRue makes a great trigger. Both of those are under $100. The AST2 for Centurion and the MBT. LaRue MBT 2S.
Oh, yeah.
2-stage, and they make a single stage as well.
I'm a huge fan of 2-stage, though.
I like 2-stage.
Yeah. For ARs, I think 2-stage makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then, dude, if you just want to be no nonsense on triggers, and not saying that those
yourself a mil spec?
No, just get a Geisley. Geisley triggers are so solid.
Oh, yeah, they're expensive.
They are expensive, but they're
really nice.
They will last forever, and they're going to be so good.
Yeah.
That's what they started doing. Like some people have some issues with some of the things they build now, and they've had some, like their optic makes no sense to me personally. Sorry, but
what?
But their triggers are what what put them on the map. And the SSA super semi-automatic, and then the super semi-automatic enhanced are just really good triggers. I know they are expensive, but you can also get the G2S, which is a little bit cheaper. It's basically an SSA, and I think they just don't put it through their quality control phase or something, because they're like guaranteeing that they've gotten so good at manufacturing that it's going to be good. And really good triggers. But there's a lot of options, and there's a lot of cheaper options for sure that are going to yield very similar results. But I think Geissele, the thing that I like about Geissele is that it is a true duty trigger that has like an almost competition level performance out of it. Which I think is pretty hard to find across the board. So solid.
And if you're not interested in like a precision oriented gun and you just want one that's going to be slapping hard military primers all day, good like enhanced mil spec triggers from Centurion, or a bunch of other people will make these too. I don't remember the brands off the top of my head, but basically we probably mentioned them all at some point, making other components. Schmid makes a good one. So Schmid makes a lot of they do a lot of small parts for a lot of different things. They do triggers, they do ambi like selectors, they do a bunch of stuff, and they're all really cheap because they OEM for a lot of other people. And so that's a good company to look at for small parts for lowers, because they're high quality and cheap.
Sweet.
With good designs. So getting like a lower parts kit, that's super easy. You don't really need to get weird with that. They're all about the same. Just don't get one from Amazon. You're pretty much good.
Oh man.
So and then buffers that attaches to the lower receiver. Grips, get whatever grip you want. That's not even worth talking about. As long as it's not skeletonized aluminum and red anodized. I had to bring it up again. All right, it's over. So buffers. There's three main like systems, and you need to know which ones they are so that you can buy the proper parts for each one. There is carbine length. That's a standard. Everyone uses carbine length nowadays. Then there's rifle length, which is a fundamentally different design. You can't attach movable stocks to those. It has to be an A1 or an A2. It's just a tube, and it screws in. It doesn't have a castle nut or anything. You have to use it in conjunction with an A1 or A2 fixed stock. Or one of Magpul's variations, or like Voltor or something. But anyways, that's a separate system. Wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you're cloning something. They're really smooth because they're the travel is the same, but the spring tension is more linear, so it's not quite as like progressive and snappy. It's nice. It's what it was designed around, the AR-15 rifle length gas system and rifle length buffer system. Carbine system was a compromise to be shorter, as well as the gas system. Same thing. It's a little snappier, but it's still effective, and most people use it, and I wouldn't have any problems with anyone using one. It's the easiest to find parts. Just make sure you buy the carbine length buffer tube and carbine length buffer and carbine length spring together. You can't mix rifle parts with carbine parts because they're all different. The third one, which is a more recent thing, is the A5 system, as coined by Voltor when they made it. A bunch of companies make it now. BCM makes it. Forward Controls makes it. Sons of Liberty Gunworks makes it. A bunch of people will use this A5 system. And what it is it uses the rifle length spring with a slightly longer buffer and buffer tube to keep the spring tension more linear, and it slows the action down, keeps it from being as progressive. It doesn't clamp the spring down as far, basically. It gives it more leeway. So it's a softer recoil impulse slightly. It's more forgiving for gassed guns under suppression, and it can increase your reliability with different cartridges that may or may not have less or more gas.
Yeah.
So it's a nice system. The changes are relatively small, but they are there. And so you might like there's if you're not looking for a compact gun, or it's only about an inch longer, so it's really not that big of a deal. But it does offer some nice advantages. So I wouldn't say if you have a carbine system to change it unless you're having issues. So, but if you're building one, it's something to look into. Do some research on it. But just make sure it's A5 length buffer and buffer tube, because if you mix parts, you're gonna have problems.
Yeah.
And then rifle length spring. So there's only rifle and carbine length spring.
Yep.
The A5 is a compromise that takes the rifle length spring, but makes you able to use. So it's basically a rifle length operating system. It's the same, but it allows you to use adjustable stocks, normal carbine stocks. So that's what I use right now, and it's pretty cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
They work really good.
Yeah.
I think we
nice.
all have a build out there that's got
A5.
one on. You've got one.
Yep.
I've got one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people are using them now with good success, but I think it's overblown a little bit. At least it was like the big craze where like everyone has to have an A5 system.
Yeah.
Because it's like the single greatest thing that's ever happened to a firearm operating system. And it's not.
No.
The carbines work just fine.
Yep.
They have for decades.
Yeah.
So
I think my thought process behind it is like I rarely go down to that like farthest fixed position on a carbine length tube anyways.
So there's no reason to not.
So it's like, why wouldn't you just run the rifle length A5 system?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's no reason not to if you're building one and it's easily accessible. But
I mean, unless you're a tiny person and you need to collapse that stock all the way down. Like, if you're small and running body armor, then you might want to be able to go all the way collapsed.
But it almost comes all the way in.
It's like I think it goes to the second notch. Like,
the second notch. So it doesn't quite touch the. It's about an inch or 1.25.
Is that one
inches.
right there that's on your rifle?
Yep. This is at its closed position. So you're about 1 to 1.25 inches.
Yeah,
something like that.
Not even far off.
Yeah. So not a big deal, but it does do a little bit. So small changes that make it longer for small changes that make it gassed a little bit nicer.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever you want.
Yep.
Stocks, get the one that's comfortable. There's 8 billion stocks out there.
Yep.
But make sure it's the SOP mod. Because it's the coolest.
Yeah. Quick companies on stocks, I'll just rattle off. BCM again, makes good furniture. Magpul, they make really good stocks.
Yeah.
B5, which makes the SOP mod and several other stocks. And if you stick to any of those, you're going to be fine.
And then for springs, also inside the buffer area, Springco makes really good springs. They make different weights. Buy the normal one, and then if you run into issues, get a lighter or heavier one. Also, buffer weights are kind of a weird thing. So normal carbine buffer has 3 weights in it. They're all steel. And then you can make them heavier based on if your action is too fast or really gassy or having too much recoil, or you're suppressing it. You can replace those steel weights with a tungsten weight. A lot of people will actually go out and buy an entire new buffer that's an H1 or an H2, and you don't have to do that. You can if you want 2 buffers, but you can also just pop out the little roll pin. If you take out your buffer, you'll see a big roll pin right by the plastic back end of it.
Yep.
Just pop that thing out and all the weights will fall right out. And then just put in your tungsten weights, tungsten first. You can do H1, H2, or H3, which just means how many tungsten weights you've put in instead of steel.
Yep.
So, a lot of guys, it's probably a safe bet to start with an H1. With a normal build. Because carbine is generally a little bit too light for most guns. So just start with an H1 and see where that takes you. So unless you're doing some weird gas tuning thing, and then start lighter and go heavier. So anyways, small detour into gas or the buffer system and ways that you can adjust it.
I think it's important too to especially if you're building in this vein of like serviceability and reliability, to properly install and then stake your castle nut. Which is where your buffer tube interfaces with your low receiver and then gets screwed down to the receiver.
Yes.
There's a little ring that it's your end plate on the back of your receiver. And if you've ever looked at the castle nut, which is that ring again that tightens to the end plate.
Looks like a castle.
Yeah, it looks like the top of a castle or the
That's why they call it that.
The top of what's that called? A rook on a chessboard? No. What is that one called? I don't play chess, just in case you were wondering. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I'm not the NRA.
Looks like a nice.
Got him.
But anyways, there's these little gaps, these little square notches that are on the ends. So it's on the receiver side of that castle nut. And if you've ever wondered what those are for, well, that's literally for staking your castle nut. And the way you do that is you just put a punch basically, or on that metal end cap.
The end caps are always soft steel.
Yep.
Because they're made to be staked.
And then you punch it, and it'll malform part of that end cap into that little notch, and it'll help retain your castle nut.
Basically, you have to rebend that steel in order for the castle nut to come off.
Yeah.
And so end plates are one-time use.
Yep.
That's why you put it on, stake it, and leave it. 2 stakes is mill standard, and on every castle nut there is, no matter how tight you get it, there's always 2 on the stakeable area. That's how they build them.
Yep.
There are some that you can get that are 3, because some people are just religious about staking.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's the most important thing on their firearm. Like, well, let me see your stakes. Oh yeah, disgusting.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you do it twice, that thing ain't going nowhere. So you can get crazy with it, but you don't need to.
What do you think about ratcheting castle nuts?
I think a lot of things, and none of them are positive. Now, some people have them and they work, but it just doesn't make any sense why you would do that.
Yeah.
Why would you buy that whole system when you could just do it the easy way? And I've also heard of people that fails.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason why you have to stake these is because the tolerances that were designed for mill standard buffers and lowers are like a grade. I don't know what they call them. There's different grades of threading, right? That's different levels of precision.
Mm-hmm.
The grade is very low, meaning it will loosen itself under fire, and this undergoes a lot of vibration, and there's a buffer that's going through that thing constantly. And there's 4 things to worry. There's 4 things that are all have the ability to move separately. There is the lower receiver, there is the end plate, there's the castle nut, and there's the buffer. And all those things can start loosening each other because they all don't fit perfectly together. And that's why you need to stake it.
Yeah.
Now, companies like Knight's Armament, they actually do a higher grade thread, and they build their own lowers, right? So that every component is their own spec.
Mm-hmm.
And that you do not have to stake a castle nut on a Knight's Armament. And some of their builds, they actually don't even have an area to stake it.
Yeah.
Because they don't come loose, because they have a high precision threading. But you don't have that unless you're one of those Knights people. And then you probably didn't build the lower. So just stake it.
Yeah.
And don't send me your ratcheting castle nut.
I think it comes from this kind of this mentality of like, oh, I don't want anything to be like marred or scratched or damaged on the gun, like, you know. And that mentality is just, again, it doesn't meld well with this whole concept. So try to abandon
embarrassing.
That. It's no, but seriously, it's like, this is a tool, you know, and it's not made to be super pretty, and don't worry about your coatings being protected and all this. Like, just put it to work. And I think stuff like this, like paying this close attention to the different aspects of the gun, really helps you accept that it is a tool.
Yeah.
So stake it.
You will get to that point, and staking it's going to help.
Yeah.
Also, throwing it out of your window
will help too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll
nice.
help. Painting it will help. We'll get to that.
Oh,
what else? I had something I was going to say. Oh, I've heard people, this is some of the dumbest thing I've ever heard, is like guys that are like, you know, quote unquote in the military, you know, which means they know everything about firearms. regardless of what position they were in. And they'd be like, yeah, when I was, I know guys that didn't stake their castle nut because they needed to take it apart to clean it or change the buffer.
What?
Yeah. They're like, well, in case my buffer tube breaks, I'm able to take it apart easily. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. No one's breaking their buffer tube, and you can remove the buffer from the lower.
Yeah.
So you'd never have to take the buffer off once you put it on.
Yeah.
That's some hogwash.
And staking your castle nut doesn't mean it's permanently affixed.
Yeah, you can always take it off. Just get a new $1 end plate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So don't listen to people that say that in case you find someone that's saying that they need to take it apart.
The staking just keeps it from coming off under regular use. Like,
yeah,
you take it to somebody that's got the proper tool, and they're just gonna be able to twist it off of there.
Yeah.
So,
or you can have the proper tool and twist it off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, anyways, I had to bring that up.
Yeah. Good. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other things about the lower that you could get into, like the safety and different things like that. I don't think it's worth spending too much time on. A lot of that comes down to personal preference.
Mm-hmm.
But and kind of like what you said about grips, like get what you like.
Yep.
Some people like the 60-degree throws. Some people like 90s. Some people like ambi safeties. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and at the end of the day, it's apply all these same things as far as reliability and strength, and you'll be good to go.
Yep. And then just use it and find out what you like. Like if you don't know what you like, start out with the most basic thing. Don't try to get fancy because you think you might need it. I've done that before.
Yeah.
I used to like get all the fancy parts in case I wanted it later. And I'm like, well, I think maybe I want that. And then I realized that I never ever used it. And that kind of stuff. So start basic and then be like, man, I wish I could have done this or had an ambi like mag release or something. And then you put it on, and then you realize that it drops your mags on your kit all the time. Mm-hmm. See, when we were out, like, was it a year ago or something? Remember, I dropped like 50 mags. Yeah, just on my kit because I had the wrong ambi.
Yeah,
like, and I'm right-handed, so it's really not that big of a deal that I had that on there. It didn't do anything for me, but it did make my mag fall off every 15 steps while I'm just traipsing through the woods. And that's a huge pain.
Yep.
And if you don't know it fell, then it's even worse because now you don't even have a magazine and it's somewhere gone.
Yeah.
So,
for sure.
Yeah. Run it and use it and see what you need and don't have anything extra that you don't.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the next thing?
A huge part of the build in general is obviously going to be your optics package. And we're going to talk about that in a separate episode. We're going to do a whole episode on optics because there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
And I think especially now there's a lot of new technologies that are available, a lot of new concepts, a lot of perspectives and opinions have come out on optics, especially recently even. So we will do at a later date, do kind of a follow-up that's talking about like just different tips and things on optics.
Yeah,
so,
I could ramble for another 3 hours about that.
Yeah. But let's get into kind of some maintenance stuff and just some serviceability kind of stuff.
Yeah. So obviously you need to have all the equipment to clean it. That's pretty basic stuff. Like you can just go and get a cleaning kit. Basically you want something that you can take down the bore and clean the bore, and you want little brushes that you can get in there and clean all that kind of stuff. Just look up how you would clean an AR-15 on Google.
Yeah.
And
there's really good videos, honestly, out there.
Yeah, just go ahead and do that.
Larry Potterfield.
Yeah, exactly.
No, he's back.
And then there's also like replacement parts. And the parts that generally need to be replaced, as far as breakages are concerned, are parts on the bolt carrier. If other things are breaking, that's probably a big issue. So like extractors, they break, or the extractor springs start getting not strong enough, or you shear a bolt lug, that kind of thing. Under heavy use, these things happen. And so generally the best thing to do is have an extra bolt carrier, or just a bolt, or a repair kit. For the most minimalistic type thing, which comes with like extra extractor, extra springs, that kind of stuff. But it's also nice to like have a whole bolt carrier group in case you're cleaning the gun and you drop it and you bend your gas key or something.
Yeah, or
that's a really weird niche thing, but your gun is no longer functional.
Yeah. Or you lose your firing pin retaining pin.
Yeah.
That's like such a tiny little simple piece, but now it's just gone. You can't find it. It's dark or whatever.
Your gun doesn't work.
Having an entire BCG as an extra part is overpowered. Like, it's just what should be done. I think it's easy. They'll fit anywhere. They're not very heavy. Keep it in your ruck or keep it in your like maintenance kit.
Don't cheap out on that one either.
Yeah, it should be probably the same one.
Yeah.
It's kind of almost that one is none, two is one kind of thing.
If you can't swing that because you spent the proper amount of money on your other gun, buy just a little bolt carrier group spare parts.
Yeah,
and then work up to it. Yeah. That's what I had to do.
Yeah, good way to do it.
Yeah. So,
but if you have that's where you can get yourself into trouble with like proprietary stuff.
Yeah. If you have proprietary, make sure that it lasts forever.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
That is the one benefit of like Knight's Armament situations.
Knight's Armament again.
Yeah. It has to be brought up.
So Knight's Armament has a proprietary E3 bolt system and their barrels that interface with it. It was developed by Eugene Stoner in conjunction with Knight's Armament.
Yep.
Back in the day, just to improve upon his own platform.
Which is so cool.
It is so cool. That's why they're called SR-15s. It stands for Stoner.
Stoner
which
rifle.
Is like what every Knight's Armament guy has to say to people on the street. It was designed by Eugene Stoner. It's like an AR-15, but it's even better. I'm better than you.
Welcome to the club, by the way.
Well, thank you. I'm now a proud accidental owner of a Knight's Armament upper receiver.
Accidental.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's time for me to be better than everyone else.
Welcome.
Thank you. Feels great. How you plebeians doing down there with your weird bolts that are normal?
Dude.
Yeah, just don't get too close to me. You smell bad.
The intimacy of the mic.
Yeah.
We're better than you.
We know it.
No,
I fired like 10 rounds.
Actually, we're super proprietary now and we're screwed. So
exactly.
I had to build an entire extra rifle just in case that rifle ever fails.
Yeah.
So.
But the thing about it is that there's never been like a recorded failure into normal use.
Yeah.
Ever.
Well, and it makes sense because
strong.
Yeah, and the advancements they made were smart, but getting out of that niche thing, have parts. A spare barrel is probably not necessary to just have laying around like all the time, but you'll probably need it if you're going to shoot
unless
your
you
gun
plan
a lot.
on committing crimes and you need to change your barrel.
Hold on,
cut that out.
Our attorney is calling.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, all right.
Yeah,
that's a whole nother topic that no one's going to discuss.
So yeah, I guess it's pretty simple. Keep your gun clean. I'll be completely honest. I'm not a big like gun cleaning Nazi. Like I'm not really like. I don't clean my gun very often. I clean it enough, but
the generally accepted standard is like every 1K rounds or something.
Yeah.
Is that like it? Maybe more if you're really gassy or you're suppressed.
You can overclean your gun. I know there's like, I've heard things recently of like, if anybody says that you can overclean your gun, then they're dumb and they don't know what they're talking about. It's like, nah, dude, like I've seen it. Like it's, and there's a lot of recorded evidence of that. Like if you start like rubbing off your finishes and stuff, like you're overcleaning your gun. That's
just like every time
not a good move.
After 10 rounds, you got this like stainless steel brush.
Yeah. Well, it's common in the military. Literally after every small use, you go and do like ready ups and you shoot like.
You don't even have to shoot if you're out in the rain and stuff. You're
clean your rifles, and it's like white glove level inspection, and it's like why? But anyways, it's keep it clean. It's a good way to cleaning your rifle is a good way to inspect its serviceability too. Yeah. Like as you're cleaning, you'll find defects or potential damage.
Yep.
So it makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, in conclusion, I want to talk about something that extends, in my opinion, your rifle's use and its serviceability to you as the modern day musket. And that is camouflage and concealment.
Yeah.
Why is this important? Well, because rifles are very unique shapes in general, especially the AR profile. The profile of it is like very recognizable, and that standard black rifle anodized finish sticks out like an absolute sore thumb in like pretty much every environment. There's no environment that I can really think of. Like some people are like, but what if you're in the dark shadows? It's like,
well, then everything that's the same color as your paint is going to be dark.
Yeah, it'll blend in better.
Everything didn't turn black. It's just not covered in light.
So having a way to break up the outline of your rifle is really important, because throughout history, you look at a lot of like history, even back into like World War I and World War II. One of the main ways that gun positions and ambushes and stuff were picked up was by identifying the outline of the rifle. It wasn't actually the person.
And that'll authorize a lot of strikes on people that would otherwise be civilians because they're carrying something that looks like a gun.
Yep.
Like in Iraq or Afghanistan.
Yeah.
People that are carrying like walking sticks or something, or a farm tool, just get wrecked because they're in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have something that doesn't silhouette.
Yeah.
You can do it like paint it like your environment, or you can paint it like what you wear. And so when it's on you, you can't see it.
Yeah.
So that's actually kind of underrated, is coloring it the same color as stuff that you would be wearing.
Yep.
Because it's going to be on you. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one thing. But you can get weird with it. But just...
How do you get weird with it?
You can, dude, just go listen to the beginning of Mark 12 podcast. I get so into it. Way too into it.
Definitely go if you haven't already somehow, go check out the old Brown man, the old Brown Rocket, because
that was a fun one.
He's well, I just mean you in general, because you're the old paint man. You've done a lot of paint jobs, and they always look sick. So.
Yeah, I haven't posted a lot lately on my Instagram, but I'm still there. Yeah, just posting memes.
Yeah,
but I'm working on another paint project, so it'll be kind of fun to reveal.
It's gonna be good. They always are. Yeah, paint your rifle. I think it's easy to do. Get some Krylon Rust-Oleum or some Airvo if you're super sick and somehow you find it and you have it. I think.
Or Rapco.
Oh yeah, Rapco.
They deserve more praise than Airvo.
Go check out Rapco.
Yeah.
If you're in Alaska, you just can't get it up here, but oh well, we tried.
Rapco Parts is the name of the website, or just Google Rapco spray paint camo or something, and then it'll come up. It's like a website that looks like it was made in 2004.
Yeah.
But they make great paint. I've used it before.
So their paints are for color matching like military vehicles.
Yep.
So
same with Airvo.
It's going to work really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, painting your rifle, I think just, again, it helps you accept that it is a tool for a specific purpose, and it's not something that should be like protected and cherished and put in a safe all the time. That's not.
Yep. And if you're not feeling it, just look up pictures of like old, just GWAT salty boys.
Yeah.
With these beat up things. It'll get you excited about it.
Yeah.
I look to those for inspiration all the time, because I like to use it as an art project because it's fun for me.
Yep.
But you don't have to do that. But like, if you're just thinking, man, me painting is going to look ugly, look at a bunch of other people's and just find ideas that you think look cool.
Yeah.
Or just make it ugly and just accept it. Just don't paint like your optic lenses, and don't spray paint down the barrel. You're pretty much good.
Yeah.
There's not much else you have to worry about.
Yeah. Some other things you can do to kind of break up the profile, which we'll probably touch more on whenever we do the optics episode, would be you can use like caminetting and scrim and different things like that to break up that outline, get rid of those like perfect circles and stuff like that, which are very identifiable,
recognizable to human eyes. Yeah. We're always looking for man-made shapes.
Yep.
And man shapes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yes. Well, that was a lot of information. Whew. And we have just blasted it out into the universe. There's a lot of stuff that we didn't even get into. But I think that hopefully it should put you in the right direction. Like I said, some of the more nuanced stuff like optics and maybe attachments and stuff, we'd probably have to cover in a different episode, because this thing is already just a heavy boy.
Yeah, we got really weird with it, talking about every detail.
But it's good. I think we wanted to get this out there so you have it. It's up there among our most asked questions is stuff on ARs and stuff. So feel free to, and like builds, but feel free to ask us. Feel free to ask the Brown Rocket Actual over here. And you guys have any more thoughts before we wrap her up and put a bow on it?
Not really. Just build a gun that's functional and then be well rounded.
Yeah.
Don't make guns the only thing that you've prepared. If you're interested in the preparedness, side of things. In fact, this would be one of the smaller things. Don't get too crazy with it.
Yeah.
And go and listen to the other podcasts of things that matter a lot.
Yeah.
The other episodes from this podcast.
Yeah.
Absolutely is a great place to start. But when you're ready to build a gun, or if you're already ready right now, then this is like a good way to get you started.
Yep. Yeah, we've definitely covered a lot of the more important stuff in the past, and we will continue to do so. But like I said, I just think having a good, detailed build style podcast, I think, would be good to have. So
yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully everybody learned something from it. And you got anything, Steven?
Oh, let's go do some range things.
Let's get it.
Is it time for the range?
No.